Ping swiftly finished harvesting mushrooms in the stretch and walked out of the pure woodland, arriving at the boundary where trees met open grassland. Sunlight fell moderately over this area, and the soil drained quickly. Clusters of young pine mushrooms grew thickly together. From afar, pale brown slender caps poked out of the pale green turf, easy to recognize at a glance. Autumn pine mushrooms possessed a delicate, graceful shape. Their caps folded into small cones, carrying a rich, natural savory aroma. They tasted wonderful with minimal seasoning, ranking among the finest edible fungi of autumn. Chicken stewed with autumn pine mushroom tofu soup. Just imagining the flavors made her mouth water. Ping bent down, pinching the stem close to the soil with precise fingertips. She harvested whole clusters intact, lifting them gently along their growth direction so she would not bring up clumps of mud. She originally planned to place them in her wicker backpack, but a thought crossed her mind. Sorting all the fungi by type after returning home would be far too troublesome. Glancing around and confirming she was alone, she moved them into a backpack inside her dimensional storage. This sack was reserved solely for autumn pine mushrooms. She would follow the same rule for anything she gathered later. Bending over nonstop grew tiring, yet Ping enjoyed every moment. She only paused once she had filled 5 full backpacks. Black Dog stood obediently beside her, keeping his master's instructions firmly in mind. "My wonderful Black Dog, you're the cleverest dog in the whole world." "Woof woof woof. I am the best dog, I'm amazing." "Black Dog, I'm picking mushrooms. Keep watch for me. Call out if any person or creature draws near, all right?" "Woof woof woof. I understand. I will protect you." Ping smiled and stroked Black Dog's fluffy head. After all this training, he had mastered many basic skills: sentry duty, biting, and swiping with his paws. His movements lacked polish, yet his enlarged body granted him tremendous strength and formidable power. One paw strike could snap a tree half a person's thickness. Ping trusted his vigilance most of all. Back in the city, the slightest noise outside would make him bark, and now he was even more alert. She resumed her search and soon spotted yellow boletes beside aged tree roots, rotting stumps, and damp shaded hollows within the forest. Yellow boletes grew separately, rarely forming clusters. Their plump golden caps rose above the leaf litter, standing out sharply against the surroundings and making them simple to spot. Firm and fleshy with ample moisture, yellow boletes were perfect for stir-frying, simmering in soup, or cooking with rice. Ping gently supported the underside of each thick cap with one hand, steadying the stem with the other. She lifted the whole mushroom free, trimmed muddy residue from the base using a small blade, and stored it in another backpack within her storage space. She checked her dimensional storage. She already held over 10 sacks of fungi, enough to sustain her for a long while. Deciding not to seek more mushrooms, she set out to gather wood ear fungus. Wood ears were easy to find. She recalled how they would cover wooden fences after rainfall back in the countryside. Ping sought fallen broadleaf trunks and dead old stumps along the trail. Live trees never bore wood ears. Only fully decayed, loosely barked broadleaf branches nurtured them. 5 straight days of rain had thoroughly soaked the dead timber. Dense patches of dark wood ears clung to trunk sides, branch crevices, and cracked bark. Saturated with rainwater, they expanded and looked distinctly black from a distance. Autumn wood ears nourished by seasonal rain held plump, springy gel. Crisp and tender when eaten. They eased dryness and cleansed the lungs, a prized mountain delicacy exclusive to autumn. Ping pressed her fingertips against the bark and peeled away the wood ears gently. They came off in complete sheets without tearing. This method avoided stripping the outer bark, preserving fungal threads inside the timber so new growth would emerge once more after subsequent rains. After gathering fungi and wood ears around the foothills, Ping straightened her aching waist and wiped away sweat. She lifted her gaze instinctively through interwoven treetops toward the sky. Fragmented sunlight filtered through layers of foliage, slanting onto the leaf-strewn ground. The shift of light clearly revealed how much time had passed. With no way to tell the exact hour, Ping judged time from sunlight filtering through the canopy. The sun hung squarely above the woodland at that moment. If her guess was right, noon had arrived. She had spent the whole morning bending to gather supplies and felt hungry. She pulled prepared meals out of her dimensional storage, food she had cooked during the rainy spell. A large porcelain plate heaped with steamed rice sat alongside braised potato strips, braised chicken legs, minced tofu, and red braised pork. Ping settled on a small stool, holding the plate in one hand and scooping food with a spoon in the other. Each mouthful of translucent rice paired with rich red braised pork tasted absolutely incredible. Once full, she took out another portion for Black Dog. After a short rest, she wasted no time and continued her exploration. The sun shone pleasantly, warm without being stifling. She followed damp terrain along the foothills, slowly searching for fresh autumn wild vegetables sprouting after the rains. Days of continuous autumn rain had soaked mountain soil thoroughly. In woodlands, beside streams and on grassy slopes, fertile ground brimmed with moisture. Taking advantage of the clear weather, all kinds of autumn wild vegetables sent up tender new shoots, stretching in vibrant green everywhere she looked. On a sunlit gentle slope among trees, Ping first spotted wide patches of wild shepherd's purse spreading close to the ground. Rain stripped away the harsh bitterness shepherd's purse carried in summer. Its glossy green leaves unfolded softly, clustered thickly among weeds. She leaned slightly forward, pinching only the tender top shoots and young leaves instead of pulling plants up by the roots. Leaving the rootstock intact allowed new fronds to grow later. Ping squeezed a leaf gently. Moist and supple, clear vegetable juice seeped out with light pressure, releasing a pure, refreshing herbal fragrance. She mentally planned recipes. These tender shoots would taste wonderful blanched and dressed cold, or chopped and pan-fried with wild duck eggs into savory vegetable pancakes, juicy and soft with every bite. Moving toward the semi-shaded damp forest edge, clusters of wild garland chrysanthemum grew beside humus-rich soil. Slender stems bore thin fresh leaves carrying their unique crisp herbal scent, intensified by rain. Ping snapped off tender upper shoots roughly 10 centimeters long, discarding tough, aged lower stalks. Juicy and crisp with no fibrous toughness, she planned to stir-fry them quickly over high heat to lock in their clean, bright flavor, perfect for cutting through the richness of meat dishes later. Out on open flat grassland, purslane spread across the ground. Its fleshy leaves, swollen with rainwater, looked plump and smooth, layered across soft wet mud. Ping picked only newly grown surface leaves, avoiding darkened, aged foliage at the base. This vegetable brimmed with juice, cool and lightly sweet on the palate. It was best blanched in boiling water and seasoned for a chilled side dish, refreshing and satisfying. Beyond that, purslane worked as natural herbal medicine. It cleared internal heat, dispelled dampness, cooled the blood and removed toxins, easing dry mouth and sore throats brought on by excess internal heat. Crushed and applied externally, it soothed swelling and itchiness from insect bites. Mountain bugs were abundant in autumn, so having this vegetable on hand would save her plenty of trouble. Still, she owned moonlit mint, which kept all insects far from her body. She tapped her forehead in mild chagrin. She had made an oversight. She ought to have brought a pot of moonlit mint with her, then she would never worry about bites. When she reached muddy wet ground beside a small stream, thick reeds came into view, together with broad patches of wild amaranth. Pale red tinged the tender stems, paired with wide, soft leaves. The whole plant was succulent and free of coarse fiber. A light pinch from Ping snapped the stalk cleanly. Damp and fresh, it released a pleasant green aroma. She thought about cooking wild amaranth with duck chunks for dinner. The soft leaves would soak up rich meat gravy, tender and well-seasoned, creating a balanced mix of meat and greens. As she wandered and harvested, her dimensional storage gained a large supply of fresh, uncontaminated wild vegetables. Though she already had vegetables inside her storage space, none compared to those freshly gathered from fertile mountain soil. After clearing all wild amaranth in this zone, Ping stared at the towering, overlapping reeds and suddenly had an idea. There might be a surprise hidden within. She gestured for Black Dog to follow. After weeks of training, he understood her signal. He lowered his body and padded quietly without making a sound, following the water's edge lined with reeds where she had picked vegetables. Ping gripped her wooden probing stick and pushed aside dense reed fronds step by step. Reeds flourished thickly in early autumn, their stalks upright with newly blooming catkins rustling in the breeze. Deep within the reed bed lay a secluded still puddle, completely enclosed by reeds. No one could see the water from outside unless they pushed through the stalks deliberately. As she parted a thick curtain of reeds, Ping halted abruptly. Her eyes lit up as if catching autumn sunlight, and a smile tugged at her lips. She breathed extra softly, suppressing laughter, and thought to herself, just as I suspected. Floating on the enclosed puddle and resting on soft grass, beside the water lay a large flock of wild ducks. This reed-fringed hollow likely rarely received visitors, or the ducks had never been hunted. The wild ducks showed no fear or wariness of humans at all. Some curled into fluffy balls with their heads tucked beneath their wings, dozing lazily in grass nests. Others wandered to the water's edge to peck at algae, lifting and lowering their necks slowly. Around 7 or 8 ducklings paddled across the glassy surface of the puddle. When they heard movement, they merely tilted round black eyes to glance at her. They did not beat their wings to flee or retreat deeper into reeds. Their silly, innocent appearance made Ping's mouth water. Once her initial excitement faded, she calmed her racing thoughts. Her grip on the probing stick loosened, and her eyes curved gently as she scanned earth nests beneath reed roots. Another wave of joy washed over her. Pale gray rounded wild duck eggs lay half hidden under reed fluff and dry grass, lightly coated with mud. Cleverly concealed, they could not escape her gaze. Ping hesitated as she looked at the ducks and eggs. She understood clearly, if she bent to collect eggs first, movement underfoot would alarm the flock. Once the wild ducks scattered toward deeper water, she would lose this rare chance entirely. Yet if she hunted the ducks first, hasty footsteps might crack the fragile eggs, resulting in a total loss. She dared not act rashly, leaning forward to observe carefully. She watched the wild ducks drifting slowly across the puddle and considered how isolated this enclosed waterhole was. Bold inspiration formed. She resolved to move with extreme quietness and risk gathering the eggs first. Ping shifted her woven bamboo backpack lower to prevent it knocking against reeds and creating noise. Her toes touched the mud as lightly as falling autumn leaves. Before each step, she scanned the ground to avoid stepping on egg nests. She knelt halfway, using only the tip of her probing stick to gently brush dry grass and reed fronds off the eggs. She cupped each shell with the softest touch, as though holding delicate glassware. She set every egg carefully onto soft cloth lining a partition in her backpack. She kept her breathing shallow and faint the entire time. She chose not to place eggs into her dimensional storage because she hoped to attempt incubating some of them. She knelt gathering eggs for more than half an hour, losing track of how many she collected. Once the backpack filled, she stowed the rest inside her storage. When she straightened and looked up, surprise washed over her. The wild ducks on the puddle still showed no panic. Only a few lifted their heads to stare at her briefly before returning to pecking algae or dozing, drifting just a short distance toward the center of the water instead of taking flight. Long isolation and peace had dulled their instinct to flee from humans. After tucking the last visible pale gray wild duck egg safely into storage, Ping straightened her aching back. The tense caution weighing on her chest finally eased. She turned her gaze toward the unaware ducks floating on the puddle, a hopeful smile spreading across her face. The hunting intent she had set aside while gathering eggs returned in full. First, she set down the bamboo backpack and leaned her solid wooden probing stick against a thick reed stalk beside her, freeing her arms. Black Dog seemed to grasp his master's plan. He dropped low onto mud outside the reeds, ears flattened. His tail swept lightly over the ground without making a sound, acting as a silent lookout. Ping lightened her stance once more, bending forward steadily. Her toes pressed into rain-softened mud as softly as floating willow fluff. Before every step, she checked for leftover egg nests underfoot. She circled slowly toward grass nests where the largest adult wild ducks rested along the bank. These ducks carried full, thick plumage and sturdy bodies. They had tucked their heads beneath warm wing feathers, curled into fluffy balls for a nap, oblivious to quiet footsteps nearby. Ping held her breath, slowing her breathing to shallow inhales, and locked her gaze onto the wild duck closest to her. She spread her arms slightly, relaxing her elbows and building flexible strength in her fingertips. Once she stepped within reach, she leaned forward smoothly and swiftly. Her palms clamped firmly around the base of the duck's warm, fluffy wings, securing them before the bird could flap. In the next instant, she moved the duck into her dimensional storage. Living creatures could not survive within the storage space. The wild duck perished the moment it entered, its neck lolling limply. The remaining ducks stared at her in shock, witnessing the bird vanish out of sight. She repeated the same action, quickly catching more ducks and placing them into storage. When she captured the 5th duck, the flock finally reacted. Loud quacks erupted as they scrambled to escape. The wild ducks flapped dark brown wings and took off, striking reed stalks and sending them wrestling. Chaotic quacks echoed everywhere. Ducklings floating on water paddled frantically, diving into winding reed channels in the deepest part of the puddle, leaving ripples spreading outward. Several slower birds tumbled into shallow water, hurrying away through gaps in the reeds. Within mere seconds, the once lively puddle emptied. Only loose reed fluff and scattered duck feathers drifted across the water's surface. Ping smiled as she watched swaying reeds and the calm water. She heaved her full backpack onto her shoulders, holding one recently caught wild duck in her hand. With her precious haul, she turned to leave. Ping deliberately took a different route away from the puddle so she would not disturb the frightened ducks hiding deep within the reeds. She did not hunt them to extinction. She left plainly visible eggs untouched to sustain the mountain wildlife. Taking only what she required, avoiding overharvesting, she protected the waterfowl living around this small puddle. In years to come, wild ducks would continue to gather and rest here. That was the basic principle anyone venturing into mountains seeking natural bounty ought to follow. Ping carried her heavy bamboo backpack stuffed with intact plump pale gray wild duck eggs, weighing the woven bamboo down. They counted among her most valuable finds of the day. In her right hand, she gently held a plump adult wild duck with neat, complete feathers, its body still retaining warmth. At her feet, Black Dog followed closely. Cool evening wind ruffled his sleek dark fur as he stayed faithfully by her side. She focused fully on the path, protecting the fragile eggs inside the backpack and watching slippery mountain trails, paying no attention to the fading daylight. Only after stepping out from woodland onto open grass did she glance upward and gasp. Time had slipped away unnoticed, and evening had arrived, wrapping the mountains in gentle twilight. Magnificent sunset glow blanketed the whole wilderness. The sun hung low just above distant mountain ridges, painting drifting clouds molten orange and soft peach pink, layered across the pale blue darkening sky. Rain had left mist lingering through mountain valleys. Thin wisps of haze wrapped around hills, veiling distant dark mountain silhouettes in gentle blur. After days of rain, plants looked exceptionally fresh and vivid. Every leaf and blade of grass glowed with warm golden sunset light. Wind stirred, shifting dappled shadows softly. A mild, cool evening breeze brushed her skin, carrying the sweet scent of damp soil and delicate plant fragrances. In the distance, mountain stream waters shimmered with broken flecks of light beneath the dying sun, and the gurgle of running water drifted faintly on the air. Flocks of returning birds streaked across the crimson sky, their soft chirps sinking into the quiet mountain wilderness. The mountain twilight was breathtakingly serene. Its beauty settled gently over her heart. Yet that same stillness carried a quiet hint of the dangers lurking in the forest once night fell. Oh no! A twinge of unease tightened Ping An's chest. She had spent the day gathering wood ear mushrooms, wild vegetables, collecting wild duck eggs, and catching wild ducks. Her abundant harvest had filled her with delight, making her lose track of time. She had completely forgotten to watch the clock. Ping An knew well that after autumn rains, the mountain forests grew damp, and wild beasts grew far more active. The gentle wilderness by day concealed countless unseen threats once darkness fully descended. Snakes and insects roamed after dusk, predators set out to hunt. One could not afford even the slightest carelessness deep in these woods. Ping An issued calm orders. Xiaohei, stand guard. Keep watch all around us. Bark at once if any creature draws near. Xiaohei responded with a series of sharp barks. The muscles beneath his fur tensed, his eyes scanning vigilantly, ears pricked straight upward. Ping An quickened her pace. In one hand she held the wild duck steady, with the other, she steadied the basket brimming with duck eggs slung over her shoulder. Moving swiftly yet surely, Xiaohei stayed close at her heels, trotting alongside her without slackening his watch. Human and Hasty hurried toward the safe mountain hut, racing against the last streaks of sunset glow. Only when the familiar outline of the courtyard came into view did Ping An's anxious heart finally settle. She circled the perimeter wall once, then stepped quickly into the yard and bolted the gate. She set down her harvest immediately and began carefully inspecting the property for safety risks. Ping An followed the courtyard wall and examined every stretch thoroughly. Afterwards, she walked inside to check each bedroom and main hall, carefully inspecting corners and wall crevices, to make sure damp bugs and crawlers had not crept in after the rain. The house remained dry, tidy, and undisturbed. When she found the time, she had to plant all her moonlight potholes. If she placed a pot in every corner indoors, she would never need to worry about snakes, insects, rats, or vermin sneaking inside again. After confirming everything was secure inside and out, she pushed open all the windows. In an instant, the fading twilight, cool night breeze, and unseen perils of the wild forest were shut out completely. Within the house lay quiet stability, a small, warm, secure world of its own. Once all safety checks were finished, Pingin could finally relax and set about preparing a hearty mountain feast for dinner. She laid the plump wild duck onto a clean solid wood chopping board. This wild waterfowl had lived undisturbed in mountain marshes, feeding daily on aquatic plants and small insects. Its meat was firm and lean, with fine, tight muscle fibers and almost no excess fat, the finest, pure wild game untouched by human hands. Patiently and carefully, she plucked every feather, picking away tiny residual down until the duck's skin was spotlessly clean. She then made a careful incision, gently clearing out the windpipe, blood clots, residual blood, and other unwanted matter from the cavity, removing unnecessary internal organs and leaving only solid meat. Once the duck was cleaned, she rinsed it repeatedly to wash away leftover blood and faint traces of raw gore, keeping both the cutting board and her hands clean. She then picked up a short blade and chopped the whole duck along its natural muscle grain into evenly sized chunks, plump, firm, and pale pink with freshness. To rid the wild duck of its subtle aquatic tang and lock in its natural savory flavor, Pingin placed all the duck chunks into cold water, adding slices of ginger, green onions, and cooking wine to draw out unwanted fishiness. She heated the pot slowly over low flame, gradually forcing out hidden blood impurities trapped deep within the meat. When fine pale red foam surfaced on the water, she scooped it away over and over patiently until the broth ran clear. Once blanching was complete, the duck meat had tightened and turned clean. She fished the chunks out, rinsed surface foam with warm water, and set them aside to drain. Every step to remove odd flavors was handled meticulously, leaving no unpleasant aftertaste. Pingin stretched out a hand and retrieved the fresh mountain ingredients she had gathered that day from her spatial storage. Planning to simmer a duck soup, she gently rinsed green head mushrooms and yellow boletes to wash off surface oil, trimmed tiny root ends, and sliced them into uniform thick pieces. Wild autumn wood ear mushrooms were soaked briefly in clean water until they softened and unfurled. She rubbed away with scraps and dry grass debris, revealing dark, translucent fungus rich with gelatin. Meanwhile, she washed enough wild vegetables to feed herself and Xiaohei, draining them and setting them aside. In moments, the kitchen was lined neatly with wild mushrooms and greens, bright, fresh hues filling the space, carrying the distinct earthy aroma unique to autumn mountain wilderness. Looking at the cleaned vegetables, mushrooms, and duck meat, Ping's mouth watered. Everything was purely wild, untouched by pollution. It was bound to taste incredible. Pingin lit firewood beneath the earthen stove. Thin twigs ignited steadily, flames flickering warmly inside the firebox, crackling softly. Comforting kitchen smoke filled the room. She heated the iron pot and poured in a small amount of oil. Once the oil reached a mild temperature, she added sliced ginger, green onions, and garlic, simmering slowly over low heat to release their sharp, refreshing fragrance. Next, she tipped in the drained duck chunks and stir-fried steadily over medium heat. She took her time, cooking off surface moisture from the meat, searing the duck lightly until golden and set. This chased away any lingering faint gamey odor and brought forth the deep, natural savory taste of wild duck. Rich aroma swelled instantly within the kitchen. Once the duck was fully seared, she poured in plenty of hot water and brought everything to a rolling boil over high flame, skimming off any new foam that rose. She covered the pot tightly and turned the stove down to a gentle, steady simmer. Wild duck meat was dense and slow to cook. Only prolonged slow simmering could draw all the deep savory essence from its muscle fibers into the soup. After 40 minutes of steady, gentle cooking, the duck meat had turned tender, and the soup had transformed into soft, pale, milky white. Thick, meaty fragrance drifted nonstop out through gaps in the lid. Pingin lifted the lid and added the yellow boletes, green head mushrooms, and autumn wood ears one after another. The thick mushrooms released their wild fragrance as they heated, blending seamlessly with the duck broth to create layered, balanced flavors, rich without heaviness, bright without blandness. She replaced the lid and simmered another 20 minutes, letting the mushrooms soak up the soup's essence, while the fresh mountain sweetness tempered the strong wild meat flavor. For the final 10 minutes before serving, she added tender mountain amaranth and wild garland chrysanthemum. The bright green vegetables added color and cut through richness, balancing the meaty soup to taste clean and vibrant. Ping seasoned only with a little fine salt, adding no artificial condiments. She relied entirely on the natural flavors of wild duck, autumn mushrooms, and wild vegetables to showcase the ingredients' true taste. While the duck soup simmered slowly, she kept busy. She took 6 fresh wild duck eggs from her basket. The shells felt smooth and cool in her palms. When cracked open, the egg whites were thick and translucent, yolks golden and full. Far richer and more aromatic than ordinary farm eggs. She whisked the eggs quickly into smooth golden liquid carrying a faint natural egg scent. Once the oil heated up, she poured in the beaten eggs. A crisp sizzle echoed as the egg mixture puffed and solidified. Ping tossed in chopped green onion and stir-fried over high heat. The finished scrambled wild duck eggs were a tempting golden shade, dotted with emerald green onion. Attractive to look at and delicious. The duck soup was ready. Ping lifted the pot lid, and a wave of rich, pure savory steam surged out to fill the entire cottage. The milky soup simmered gently, clear and lustrous like polished jade. Yellow boletes and green head mushrooms were plump, soaked through with broth. Wood ear mushrooms were smooth and springy, tender green greens scattered through the soup. Shades of red, green, black, and white intertwined beautifully. Just the sight of it lifted her spirits. Ping carried a large basin of steaming mushroom and wild duck soup to the dining table. She retrieved steamed rice she had stored in her space, along with the green onion scrambled duck eggs she had just made. Sitting down, she began to enjoy her meal quietly. The first mouthful of hot soup slid down her throat, smooth and rich, fresh all the way to her bones. The depth of duck broth, bright sweetness of mushrooms, and clean freshness of wild vegetables merged perfectly. A pure, lasting savory flavor that lingered pleasantly. Ping felt her stomach soothed completely. She bit into a piece of wild duck meat. Firm yet springy, every strand carried flavor. Tasting richer the more she chewed, with no trace of unpleasant gaminess. The mushrooms offered varied textures, crisp, soft, and smooth, while the wild vegetables cut through the heaviness of the soup. With bright freshness. The scrambled wild duck eggs were soft and delicate, intense pure egg flavor filling her mouth with every bite. Paired with steamed rice, it was simply wonderful. Ping ate mouthful after mouthful. A classic advertising slogan popped into her mind, simply impossible to stop. Beside her, Xiaohei gnawed on duck bones tossed his way. His teeth had grown far sharper, and he crunched through the bones effortlessly. It was far from enough. Xiaohei lifted his fluffy head and rubbed against Ping's leg. Not wanting to stop eating to wash her hands halfway, Ping quickened her pace. After finishing her dinner, she scooped 2 big spoonfuls of rice, mixed it with duck soup, and poured it into the dog bowl, topping it with leftover scrambled duck eggs. Xiaohei sat obediently waiting the whole time. He only began eating once Ping gave him permission. Woof woof woof. This is amazing. I've never tasted food this good. Ping watched Xiaohei, whose tail wagged furiously, and smiled, reaching out to stroke him. She loved seeing him focus on his meal. Every time she watched, her heart softened completely. Ping glanced outside. Darkness stretched endlessly, swallowing all light. She walked into the kitchen. Embers in the stove had died down. She portioned the leftover mushroom duck soup and stored it in her spatial storage, tidied the dishes. Then moved to the main hall. She had risen early that morning to work and had yet to complete her daily system check-in. Thinking back to the morning, Ping suddenly remembered she had not collected the laundry and quilts she hung out to dry. She stepped into the yard and touched the clothes. They were fully dry. The quilt retained warm sunlight's gentle scent. She stored everything inside her space to sort out when it was time for bed. After a brief walk with Xiaohei, Ping sat on the sofa and tapped the system interface to sign in. Ding! Congratulations! You have obtained Body Refining Elixir ×1, Detoxification Pill ×3, Strength Pill ×1. Ping sat bolt upright, eyes fixed on the glowing text floating before her. Anyone familiar with novels knew how precious these 3 items were. Each one was worth fighting over. She wasted no time opening their descriptions. Body Refining Elixir clears old bodily ailments, widens meridians, and rebuilds physical foundations. May be used externally or consumed orally. Warning: use triggers the agony of bone and tendon refinement lasting 12 hours. Detoxification Pill. 1 pill can neutralize nearly all poisons. Strength Pill. Permanently raises upper physical strength limits. Thank you, system. Without you, I would not have survived 3 days. Thank you for always supporting me. Ping An's voice trembled as she read the descriptions. The looming countdown to the system's disappearance weighed constantly on her mind. She tried not to dwell on it, yet worry lingered all the same. There was no reply, but Ping An did not mind. She continued murmuring words of gratitude. Somewhere unseen, the system watched her gently. "You're welcome. You have earned all of this." Before it faded away, it could only provide as many valuable supplies as possible to ensure she survived in this unfamiliar world. It had wanted to grant her a supernatural ability, yet too many restrictions stood in the way. Still, it had left her a surprise. She would discover it before long. The system closed its eyes wearily. Staying for 30 extra days was already pushing its limits. Ping An tapped to claim her rewards. A palm-sized frosted glass bottle materialized in her hands, shrouded in faint milky white glow and sealed tightly with a cork stopper. Clear pale cyan liquid shimmered inside, casting tiny emerald ripples when she tilted the bottle. She brought it close and inhaled. Only a faint, clean herbal scent met her nose. The detoxification pills were small and round, sharing the same pale, translucent jade hue as the elixir, as if coated in morning dew, carrying that same subtle, pure herbal aroma. The strength pill was smooth, tawny yellow, carved with strange patterns, and had no discernible scent. Ping An made up her mind. She would take the strength pill first. Boosting her strength would help her endure the severe pain brought by the body-refining elixir's tendon cleansing. She held the tawny pill and swallowed it with a few sips of warm water. Moments later, a warm current bloomed in her lower abdomen, spreading slowly through every vein and limb. The soreness in her back and shoulders built up from working in the mountains faded away like ice melting under sunlight. Even faint weariness lingering at her fingertips vanished beneath the soothing warmth. The medicinal heat traveled toward her shoulders, waist, legs, and arms. Her bones and muscles felt as if gently stretched, her lean frame filling with steady, powerful energy. She stretched her arms and felt a heavy, stable strength welling inside her. Joy surged through Ping An. She hurried up to the second-floor bedroom and lifted the solid wooden bed with one hand. This heavy bed had once required all her strength merely to tilt one leg upward. Now she hoisted it effortlessly with a single arm. She clenched both fists, feeling vibrant power filling her body. She longed to grab her bow and test her strength outside, but when she glanced through the window at the pitch-black wilderness, she decided to wait until daylight. She pulled 2 sacks of coal out of her storage space and lifted them with ease. "Woohoo! Incredible. I'm strong now." Ping An cheered aloud. Xiaohei tilted his head in confusion, unable to understand his owner's excitement. "Woof, I don't get it. I think I'll go sleep." Knowing the body-refining elixir would bring intense pain, and now armed with far greater strength, Ping An worried she might accidentally break the bed while suffering. She laid out a mat and 2 quilts in the second-floor living room. "Xiaohei, go downstairs. Don't stay up here. I have something important to do." Xiaohei let out confused barks, yet obeyed and trotted down. Once Xiaohei left, Ping An locked the door at the top of the staircase. Now she could safely drink the body-refining elixir. She planned to consume it directly. External application would be far less convenient. She pulled out the cork from the frosted glass bottle. Pale cyan liquid swirled with emerald light, herbal fragrance drifting toward her. Ping An's heart fluttered. She tilted her head back and drank every drop in one go. She coughed slightly from drinking too quickly. A soft warmth flooded her limbs and torso, yet before she could savor it, it transformed into sharp surging force, cleansing her tendons. The overwhelming agony of tendon and bone refinement crashed over her. At first, thin stinging prickles spread beneath her skin, like countless fine vines creeping through her pores. Soon the sensation morphed into searing pain that pierced straight to her bones. Old accumulated fatigue and blocked meridians deep inside her limbs were torn, fleshed out and shattered by the elixir. Her back went rigid. Fingers clutched tightly into the quilt beneath her, knuckles whitening under pressure. Sweat sprouted across her forehead instantly. Her steady breathing grew rapid and shaky. She clamped her jaw shut, swallowing groans threatening to escape her throat. This suffering was not a brief sharp shock, but an agonizing 12-hour torment. During the first several hours, the elixir repeatedly tempered her bones and tendons. Old hidden injuries sent waves of tearing dull pain. When built-up tension in her lower back was purged away, she hunched her shoulders and curled into a ball with arms wrapped around her knees. Midway through the process, medicinal power expanded her inner channels. Constricted meridians stretched open forcefully. Faint wispy emerald light occasionally flickered from her fingertips, before vanishing as agony clouded her senses. Ping'an knew nothing of this. Waves of dizziness blurred her vision, and she clung to consciousness by sheer willpower. Toward midnight, the sharp edge of the pain faded, leaving a draining, aching weariness, as if her bones and muscles had been disassembled and rebuilt. Her eyelids grew heavy, yet residual discomfort in her flesh kept her awake. Xiaohe had lain obediently near the stair landing when he heard suppressed sounds of suffering from upstairs. He nudged the door with his head and scratched at the wood, yet dared not enter uninvited. Master told me not to come upstairs. Xiaohe paced anxiously before curling into a ball beside the door. The staircase ended at this locked door, leaving only a short stretch of floor. He huddled there, unwilling to go further down. This was the closest he could stay to his owner. By noon the following day, after 12 long hours, the piercing bone-deep pain receded like retreating tides, replaced by gentle, light warmth spreading all through her body. Ping'an loosened her grip on the quilt, or what remained of it. She had torn the bedding to shreds in her torment without realizing. Her fingertips tingled with numbness as she slowly sat up. All old dull bruises and traces of strain on her body had vanished. When she lifted her gaze towards sunlight filtering through window cracks, her vision felt clearer than ever. Ping'an stared in shock. She rubbed her eyes disbelievingly. Without glasses, she could see everything sharply. She rose unsteadily and hurried out onto the balcony. Sunlight stung her cheeks slightly. She automatically lifted her gaze toward layered, distant hills. Surprise washed over her. For years, nearsightedness had turned distant trees and reeds into blurred green smudges. Now she could clearly distinguish mist curling along mountain slopes and fine twigs on hillside shrubs. With no haze or double vision at all, she blinked repeatedly, looking far into the distance again and again. The eyesight trouble that had plagued her since junior high school was simply gone. She could not remember the last time the world appeared so crisp and bright. Ping'an stretched her shoulders and back. When she raised her arms, her range of motion felt unexpectedly wider. It seemed her viewpoint sat higher. She glanced down at her shoulder line and trouser legs. The pants were noticeably shorter. She stood straighter without the slight hunch she had carried for years. Every movement felt lighter, as if she had truly grown taller. Overjoyed, Ping'an rummaged through her spatial storage until she found a measuring tape. She held it to her frame and gasped. 175 centimeters. She had grown a full 7 centimeters. She laughed aloud. Her height, unchanged ever since high school, had shot up 7 centimeters overnight. Something rarer than winning the lottery had truly happened to her. A wisp of emerald light flickered at her fingertips and vanished unnoticed. She had been too overjoyed earlier to notice the stench, but now the foul smell drifted straight into her nostrils. Ping'an let out a disgusted sound and quickly washed herself thoroughly from head to toe. After drying off, she changed into soft, comfortable loungewear and walked downstairs while wiping her hair. Fortunately, she owned clothes in all sizes, so she had no trouble finding outfits that fit her new height. When Little Black spotted its owner, it whimpered and bounded over. Ping'an quickly stowed the towel inside her spatial storage and stroked its head. Woof woof woof. Master, what happened? I was so worried. Seeing how the dog acted, Ping'an guessed last night's ordeal had frightened it. She crouched down and squeezed its paws gently. I'm all right, Little Black. I drank the marrow cleansing elixir yesterday and felt unwell for a while, but I've fully recovered now. She stood and spun around to show herself off. Look, I'm taller now, my eyesight is perfect again, and my body is brimming with strength. Little Black could sense that its master was different from before, but its canine mind was far too simple to figure out exactly what had changed. It only knew that if this person were not its owner, it would not dare to meet her gaze. There was an imposing aura about her. Midday drew near. The sun hung high overhead. Morning mist covering the mountains had long been burned away. The blue sky stretched clear and cloudless, and golden sunshine spilled over the woods, courtyard, and distant hills. Only the rustle of leaves stirred by warm wind broke the silence, and everything looked bright and open. Ping'an pushed open the courtyard gate. Little Black immediately darted far ahead to relieve itself. She scanned her surroundings and detected no threats, so she did not keep a close eye on the dog. Even if danger emerged, Little Black's current strength would be more than enough to handle it. She had matters to attend to. Ping'an carried out a target she had carved herself some time ago and set it firmly on the open ground outside the yard. She stepped back 30 to 40 meters and stood still. With a thought, she retrieved the long-dormant ancient palace guardian bow from her spatial storage. The bow's frame was forged from rare, dark ancient wood, polished to a smooth, solid finish. Its natural grain twisted like scaled serpent coils, faintly glimmering with restrained, cold radiance. The bow limbs curved powerfully and smoothly. Simple, ancient cloud-shaped notches were carved into the bow tips, emanating a heavy, imposing aura. The bowstring was made of special silver-white cord. It looked thin yet possessed incredible toughness. No ornate gold or jade decorated the weapon. Its material and shape alone exuded the dignified bearing of a royal artifact from a past dynasty. It felt weighty in the hand. Ordinary people could not even shift it, let alone draw it. In the past, she lacked sufficient strength. Even straining to her utmost, she could not pull the bow open by the slightest gap. She had to make do with a crude wooden bow back then. Today, everything was different. Pingyan wrapped her fingers around the cool, solid grip and steadily tensed her arms. A low hum reverberated. The bow that once made her shoulders ache hopelessly yielded easily, drawn into a perfect full moon. The string stretched taut. Her back and waist remained as steady as bedrock. The pattern on the target 30 to 40 meters away stood crystal clear in her sight. Pingyan held her breath and released the string. Whoosh! Thud! A sharp piercing sound cut through the midday quiet. The arrow streaked forward like a dark shadow, slamming hard into the target. It pierced straight through the wooden board and buried itself in the soil behind, its feathered tail still trembling violently. A single arrow shot clean through the target, demonstrating terrifying power. She ran a hand along the bow and praised it. Fine bow. Pingyan's eyes lit up. She truly had not expected to fire such a powerful shot, though her aim still needed work. This bow was a one-of-a-kind treasure available exclusively in the trading mall. No duplicate models existed, and no spare limbs could be obtained to replace broken parts. When Pingyan had browsed the mall's weapon section before, even with enough exchange points, the panel would only display a cold notification. This item was a unique limited collection, unavailable for restock, repurchase, or replacement. From the day she acquired it, the bow was irreplaceable. If it broke, there would be no way to repair it. She resolved that she would use ordinary bows for most daily tasks from then on. She would not mind if those broke. Pingyan stroked the bow frame. Let me give you a name. How about the dark-scale sky-piercing bow? It suits your appearance perfectly. Before she could further admire the name, Little Black rushed over barking, terrified by the arrow shot. That scared the wits out of the pup. Its master's weapon looked dreadful. Pingyan calmed Little Black down and stored the bow away. She walked over to check the target, which had sustained heavy damage from the single arrow. Old friend, you've worked hard this month. Time for you to retire and rest. She placed the target into her storage, then pulled the arrow free. It had sunk deep into the earth. She could not help marveling at the effects of the strength boost pill. She glanced down at her fingertips, brimming with irrepressible excitement. Last night, she had endured agonizing marrow-cleansing pain, staying awake all night without eating or drinking a thing. Yet by noon, she felt no weariness or hunger at all. After firing that arrow, surging, robust power flowed through every muscle in her body. Her mind remained sharp and alert. Her physique had been thoroughly reforged. Pingyan folded her hands and silently thanked the system for its gift. Even though she felt no hunger, Pingyan closed the courtyard gate and brought out the mushroom and wild duck soup she had stored the previous day inside her space. Warm, rich broth steamed gently. The sweet aroma of wild mushrooms blended with the deep savory taste of duck. Paired with steamed rice, Pingyan slowly finished the whole pot of soup. After feeding Little Black, the sun blazed hotter than ever. Pingyan headed upstairs to tidy up and noticed the quilt had been torn apart during the night. It was stained black and reeked. She tossed it straight into the trash can. A flash of light appeared, and the bin returned clean and empty. The unpleasant odor still lingered faintly in the air, so she mopped the second floor repeatedly. Once all chores were done, Pingyan rested for a while on the sofa. When the sun grew less harsh, she put on a straw hat, grabbed a bamboo basket, took her fishing rod out of storage, and set off toward the shallow stream at the foot of the mountain with Little Black. She planned to gather river snails for dinner. She had craved river snails ever since spotting them yesterday. River snails, clams, and crayfish were her favorite foods. In her previous world, every summer she would order a pot of clams, a pot of crayfish, and a pot of snails, alongside grilled skewers, eating until she broke out in a sweat. Cool evening wind and cold drinks would complete the perfect feast. It was not long before Ping'an reached the stream. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the canopy beside the bank, casting shimmering golden patches across the clear water, a lovely sight. Back in the village, she had always been skilled at catching fish and snails. With her newly restored sharp vision, she would be even better. The sunlight heated the grass along the stream bank. Ping'an rolled her trousers up to her knees and stepped barefoot into the cool stream water. The water only reached halfway up her calves. Mountain spring chill instantly chased away the midday heat. Smooth pebbles beneath the water brushed against her soles, creating a ticklish yet reassuring sensation. Ping'an slung the bamboo basket over one shoulder and bent down. Thanks to the transformation from the marrow-cleansing elixir, her vision was remarkably clear. She could see every movement hidden among the stones straight through the transparent current. Beneath rocks in the shallow shallows, countless plump river snails clung tightly to the stone surface. Their gray-brown shells were lightly coated in algae, and they bulged with firm meat inside. Ping'an slowly dipped her fingers underwater. She firmly gripped one large snail, shook off the water droplets, and tossed it into her shoulder basket. When she found large stones covered in clusters of snails, she half squatted in the stream and reached into rock crevices to collect them one by one. Soon the bottom of the basket held a thick layer of heavy snails. Occasionally, silvery stream fish darted away in fright, slippery as oil. Before, with poor eyesight, she could never catch them. Now she simply tracked their swimming path. Her hand shot forward swiftly. Cold water splashed everywhere as she cupped a wriggling fish securely in her palm. It soon joined the catch in the basket. Nearby, Little Black lay on a shaded stone, panting and wagging its tail. It lifted its head from time to time to watch the splashes its master made, looking utterly adorable. After gathering more than half a basket of snails, Ping'an remembered her fishing rod. She searched for a while but found no earthworms to use as bait. She took a small shovel and walked to damp, dark soil beside the stream. Digging through loose earth, she soon unearthed thick, lively earthworms wriggling in reddish mud. She picked out the plumpest ones, brushed off dirt, and threaded them firmly onto her iron fish hooks. Ping'an followed the stream upstream until she reached a deep pool around a river bend sheltered by an old tree. Thick foliage shaded most of the area. The pool water lay dark and still, one of the few spots along the stream large enough to hold sizable fish. She dragged over a wide flat stone to sit on, set up her black fishing rod, lowered the baited hook into the dim water, and rested her fingers lightly on the rod tip as she waited. Moments later, the thin rod tip bent sharply under a powerful tug. The fishing pole nearly got dragged into the pool. Ping'an tightened her grip and stabilized herself. Drawing on the immense strength gained from her physical transformation, she steadily absorbed the brute force of the large fish beneath the surface. Calmly reeling out line to tire it out. The massive creature repeatedly twisted toward rock crevices and fought to break free, yet Ping'an maintained complete control of the line. After a prolonged struggle, the fish slowly ran out of stamina. She seized the chance to pull upward and wind in the line. A huge brown catfish with glossy, tightly packed scales was dragged out of the water. Its thick body thrashed on the stone, sending water splashing everywhere. It weighed roughly 3 to 4 gene, unquestionably the kingfish of this stream. She pinned the still wriggling catfish and placed it in the basket, unable to hide her delighted smile. She baited the hook and cast again. Palm-wide silver carps, half-foot-long fat crucian carp, and mandarin fish weighing over half a gene took the bait one after another and were hauled into the basket. Only once the basket sagged heavily under the weight of snails and fish did Ping'an slowly pack away her fishing tackle. She tapped the side of the basket and called Little Black, planning to continue exploring the mountain forest further upstream. She had seen many wild fruits on her way back the previous day. Since she was already here, she would gather some to take home. As she walked into the denser woodland slope, rustling sounds suddenly came from a bush ahead. Ping'an instantly pressed Little Black's head down, signaling it to stay quiet and move softly. She peered carefully from behind tree shadows. A plump wild rabbit with brown fur and distinctive white tips on its ears was lowering its head to nibble alfalfa on the slope. Its round body was full of meat, and its ears twitched alertly every few seconds. Ping'an's heart leaped with joy. This was the perfect chance to test her dark-scale sky-piercing bow. She quietly retreated behind several low shrubs, took out the bow and an arrow. She drew the bow fully and aimed at the rabbit's hind leg, then released the string. The arrow skimmed across the soil. Startled, the rabbit immediately tried to dart into the thicket. The shot missed. Pinyin sprinted forward, catching up to the fleeing rabbit in a few quick strides. She pressed her palm firmly onto its fluffy back and restrained the plump rabbit with gentle pressure. Little Black trotted over, circling the prey and wagging its tail nonstop. "Ha, what a rewarding day." Pinyin laughed. She lifted the heavy rabbit, carried the bamboo basket full of snails and fresh fish, and headed home alongside Little Black. Back at the house, she closed the gate and squatted under the kitchen eaves to sort out all the wild harvest from the day. She poured the basket full of plump river snails into a large basin, filled it with water to cover the shells, sprinkled a pinch of fine salt, dripped some sesame oil, and stirred the water. She also dropped a pair of scissors into the basin as metal stimulation to encourage the snails to expel sand. The oil film blocked most oxygen on the water's surface. To breathe, the snails would continuously draw in and expel water, flushing all sand out of their bodies and sinking it to the bottom. Pinyin moved the basin into the kitchen and covered it with coarse cloth to keep dust out. She planned to clean and trim the snail shells tomorrow afternoon to cook fragrant stir-fried river snails. For now, she would let the shellfish purge sand slowly. There was no rush to cook them. Next, she stunned the fat rabbit with a light blow. Holding a small blade, she cut open the fur at the nape of its neck, sliced carefully along its limb joints, grabbed the edge of the hide and peeled it downward. Pinyin had little experience skinning animals. The rabbit pelt ended up badly cut, but she paid no mind as long as the meat remained intact. She carefully cut open the abdominal cavity, removed internal organs, windpipe, and blood-stained tissue, cleared away clotted blood, and thoroughly rinsed all traces of blood and impurities from the rabbit meat. Once cleaned, she chopped the whole rabbit into thick hind leg cuts and back meat, ideal for skewering and roasting. Pinyin crushed ginger and garlic, rubbed fine salt evenly over every piece of rabbit meat, and sprinkled pepper to enhance flavor. She left the meat to marinate for half an hour to remove the earthy wild rabbit taste. After marinating, she would pat the meat dry to prevent burning over the fire. Pinyin took a barbecue grill out of her spatial storage and set it flat on open ground in the courtyard. She filled the charcoal tray at the bottom and lit the charcoal. When open flames died down and the charcoal burned bright red with even heat, she laid the skewered rabbit meat on the grill grate, leaving enough space above the coals. She avoided direct flame, relying solely on radiant charcoal heat to roast the meat. Pinyin dragged over a low stool and sat beside the grill, turning the skewers regularly so the meat heated evenly on all sides. Under charcoal heat, the pale rabbit flesh slowly turned warm golden brown. Clear fat dripped onto the hot metal grate, making faint crackling sounds. The rich aroma of roasted meat drifted far on the evening breeze. Midway through cooking, she brushed on diluted honey to glaze the surface. When the outer layer formed a crisp, firm crust and clear juice ran out when pierced with chopsticks, the meat inside was fully cooked. While roasting the rabbit, Pinyin stayed busy. She scaled, gutted, and cleaned silver carps and small fish. She rubbed ginger over the fish to remove fishy odor, then coated them lightly with starch to stop them sticking to the pan. She heated oil in an iron wok set on a small stove until it began to smoke faintly. Then she slid the fish into the wok along the rim and fried them over medium-low heat. The small fish soon turned golden and crispy all over with crunchy skin. The palm-sized carp developed neat golden crusts on both sides. She transferred the pan-fried fish onto a plate and sprinkled cumin and chili powder over them. The appetizing aroma alone was enough to stir hunger. Using leftover heat from the stove, Pinyin cleaned wild garland chrysanthemum, tender purslane, and amaranth. She prepared a small clay soup pot, added water and ginger slices. Once the water boiled, she tossed in the wild vegetables, let them simmer 2 or 3 minutes. She added a pinch of salt and turned off the heat right away. Pinyin brought out a low table and sat cross-legged on the ground. She set 2 moon lanterns beside her to light the area and repel mosquitoes. She arranged charred roasted rabbit skewers, crispy pan-fried fish, and clear wild vegetable soup on the table. She tore off a roasted rabbit leg and took a bite eagerly. Delicious. Absolutely wonderful. The outer crust crunched satisfyingly, while the meat inside stayed tender and juicy. Rich wild game flavor blended with subtle charcoal aroma, seasoned perfectly without turning dry. She picked up a crispy, small fried fish. The skin shattered at her bite, revealing soft, sweet flesh. Even the bones were crisp enough to eat whole. Craving more spice, Pinyin opened a jar of chili sauce and brushed it over the skewers. Every mouthful delivered bold, satisfying heat. A sip of light vegetable soup cut through the richness of the roasted meat perfectly. She kept roasting and eating skewers as she dined. Before she knew it, she had finished the entire large rabbit by herself. Pingin patted her stomach. She felt no uncomfortable fullness. Evidently, as her body grew stronger, her appetite had increased greatly. She glanced at little black gnawing bones beside her and smiled. Looks like we now have 2 big eaters in this household. Little Black focused entirely on its meal and paid no attention to its owner's words. Pingin ate half a watermelon and drank 2 cups of water before finally feeling full. She would need to cook larger portions from now on, otherwise there would never be enough food. After finishing her meal, Pingin cleaned the tableware and kitchen, changed the water for the river snails. Then she went to the bathroom for a soothing hot shower. She looked at her knees. The old burn scar had vanished completely. Her whole body's skin looked newly renewed, with a healthy glow. Even her hair grew thicker, shinier, and straighter. Back in her bedroom, Pingin picked up a brush and wrote in her journal, "Today I consumed the Strength Boost Pill and Marrow Cleansing Elixir. My body has undergone transformation and become incredibly powerful. The happiest surprise is that my eyesight has recovered, so I will no longer need glasses. I have also grown taller. Fortunately, I own plenty of clothing in different sizes, so I have no trouble finding things that fit. This was my first hunting attempt. Though I missed my shot, my speed allowed me to catch the rabbit right away. I must practice more to achieve consistent accuracy. I no longer need to wear weighted sandbags or keep up my old training routine. Power surges naturally within me, only my aim requires practice. At my current level, I could knock an ox down with 1 punch. I also need to practice blade techniques and body movement skills, so I will not be helpless when danger comes." The check-in system only had 2 more check-ins left before vanishing. Deep down, she felt a twinge of fear. She dreaded the thought that everything she owned would disappear once the system was gone. She could not tell what the future held, and to this day, she had never laid eyes on another human being. Someday, she must venture outside to see the world. She would stop writing for now. Pingin closed her notebook and lay down on the soft bed. To her surprise, drowsiness washed over her almost immediately. She had suffered from insomnia for a full decade. Even after exhausting days, it usually took at least half an hour for her to fall asleep. Savoring this long-forgotten weariness, Pingin smiled and drifted off to sleep. Soft early autumn morning light slipped through the loosely drawn curtains and spilled onto the pillow in her bedroom. Freed from the constant tension built up during her recent travels, Pingin slept soundly until dawn. When she stretched, every muscle felt loose and light. She could not remember how many years it had been since she enjoyed an uninterrupted night of sleep. In the past, her rest was always fragmented, broken by nightmares in the middle of every night. When she was little, thieves had broken into her house, and a fire had erupted. That traumatic memory was likely why the scene haunted her dreams endlessly. She also often dreamed of picking up money. Pingin supposed her past poverty had left her starved for security, so her subconscious craved wealth even in slumber. She believed in the folk superstitions from rural villages. She had sought out many shamans and bought numerous blessed amulets, yet their protection only lasted a few days before the nightmares returned. Thinking back on those days, Pingin sighed. She had endured so much hardship, she barely understood how she had persisted through it all. Thankfully, everything was different now. She owned a spacious house, with no need to worry about food, clothing, or shelter. She could survive indefinitely without ever stepping outside. Yet idle thoughts crept in when one had too much free time, so Pingin kept herself occupied each day. She walked over to the window and pulled back the curtains. Golden sunlight flooded the entire room. Pingin opened the window and drew the fine mesh screen across it to ventilate the space. The tightly woven net kept all insects out. She tidied her bedding and headed downstairs to wash up. Entering the kitchen, she lifted the cover from the basin holding river snails purging sand. A thick layer of murky wastewater had settled at the bottom. She poured out the stale water, refilled the basin with fresh water, and covered it again to let the snails rest. For breakfast, she ate 2 coarse grain buns and a bowl of light wild vegetable soup. She slung a hollow bamboo fruit basket over her shoulder and called out to Xiaohei, who trotted toward her wagging his tail. Woman and dog followed the forest breeze toward the back mountain. Xiaohei bounded ahead to lead the way, his nose brushing against the grass and shrubs. He paused every now and then to glance back at Pingin. The two wandered slowly along the gentle woodland trail, brushing aside yellowed autumn grass as they searched for wild autumn fruits hidden among the trees. Halfway up the hillside, on a sunlit slope, grew a thick thicket of brambles. Their thin brown branches were lined with tiny soft thorns, a barrier most people avoided. Xiao He suddenly halted, squatting outside the bushes with pricked ears. His nose twitched toward the foliage, and he let out a low rumble to alert his owner. Ping'an understood instantly. Her dog had found something edible, and he loved food too much to be wrong. The brambles looked painfully sharp. She wrapped an extra layer of unused clothing around her long sleeves for protection. Carefully, she pushed aside the tangled branches and peered into the sheltered inner foliage. Clusters of small red wild jujubes hung densely from the twigs. Their skins glowed with a matte crimson hue, clustered tightly between green leaves. Ripe fruits swayed gently in the wind. Ping'an brightened. It was an auspicious start. She would surely gather plenty today. She avoided the sharp thorns, pinched the thin brittle stems, and twisted gently. Whole wild jujubes dropped neatly into her palm. She ignored damaged fruit, selecting only fully ripened berries with smooth, blemish-free skin. Unripe green jujubes were left untouched on the branches to mature later. Xiao He nudged low branches out of her path with his head to clear space for picking. Occasionally, he caught a ripe jujube tossed to him and crunched it happily. Before long, one corner of the bamboo basket was piled high with glossy red wild jujubes. Ping'an stored the filled basket in her spatial storage, drank some water, and slung an empty bamboo basket onto her back once more. She descended the slope and turned toward a shaded pool beside a mountain stream. Several large mature trees twisted with tough brown vines climbing upward. High in the shaded canopy hung heavy clusters of wild grapes. Each berry was dark purple and glossy, coated with a thick natural white bloom like fine snow. Broad leaves half concealed the fruit, easy to overlook unless one drew near. Ping'an stepped onto exposed tree roots to steady herself. She grasped the hanging vine, supported the weighty bunches, and cut them free cleanly with small scissors. To prevent the tight grape clusters from bruising and leaking juice, she lined the basket bottom with fabric before setting each bunch down gently. She lifted one cluster to her nose. Rich sweet fruit aroma, mixed with the cool scent of stream water, washed over her. She wiped off the bloom from one grape and bit into it. Sweet juice burst across her tongue. So sweet. Ping'an could not resist eating more than a dozen. Grapes grown in pesticide-laden greenhouses in her past life could never compare. She glanced upward. All these grapes would rot on the ground or be pecked by birds if she left them. It would be a waste of nature's bounty, so she might as well harvest them. Chuckling, she worked quickly to cut every cluster and place them in her basket. She stood on a stool to reach higher bunches, but dared not climb the trees for the rest. A fall would not be worth it. She stared at the remaining fruit high above. The birds would get to enjoy those then. She stored the grapes in her space and left the stream, heading east toward a rocky, sunlit hillside. From afar, she spotted several moderately sized trees heavy with bright red fruit. Drawing closer, she realized they were wild hawthorn trees. Their finely lobed green leaves glinted under the autumn sun, and slender boughs bent slightly under clusters of round orange-red hawthorns. Each fruit bore tiny dried brown calyx remnants at the top. They clustered thickly on sun-facing twigs, their vivid orange-red standing out sharply against the green forest. That was why she had spotted them so easily. Ping'an exclaimed happily, "Hawthorns! I can make candied hawthorn skewers." She held down low branches, pinched the short stems, and plucked ripe hawthorns into her basket. For fruit out of easy reach higher up, she again used her stool to reach out and snap off small twigs heavy with berries. After picking the fruit, she bent the branches back into place so the tree would sprout and bear fruit the next year. Ping'an squeezed one hawthorn gently. Its firm skin released a faint tart fragrance. After persistent work, the new bamboo basket overflowed with bright orange wild hawthorns. Seeing 5 full baskets of fruit inside her storage space, she decided to stop picking and head home via an unexplored route. Unexpectedly, as she neared the ancient locust tree at the forest exit, the ground was scattered with strange yellow-brown Hovenia fruit. The stalks twisted and curved like tiny canes, marked with faint wood grain and leftover dry stems. She looked upward and saw more clusters of fresh fruit still clinging to the sunlit high branches, spared by the autumn winds. What a pleasant surprise! Ping'an first bent down to collect intact fallen Hovenia fruit free of insect damage, bruises, and mold. Brushing dust from their surfaces, Then she stretched to pluck low-hanging clusters and strip the fruit into her basket. Though their rough exterior looked unremarkable, she knew the flesh inside was dense and sweet like preserved honey. She tossed a few clean stalks to Xiaohei, who squatted at her feet waiting. The dog caught them and swallowed them one by one. Humming softly, Ping'an walked home with her heavy harvest alongside Xiaohei. On the way back, she noticed piles of dry fallen branches and broken timber scattered along the slope. She already stocked plenty of firewood in her storage, yet there was no harm gathering more. She bundled the wood and stored every bundle in the fuel section of her space. When she passed the mountain stream, she filled 2 large buckets with fresh water and stored them as well. She returned home with Xiaohei as the sunset dyed the sky. Ping'an washed her hands and face, drank a large cup of water, then went to the kitchen to change the water for the river snails once again. She walked into the main hall, refilled Xiaohei's bowl with snacks and water, and collapsed onto the sofa to rest. Once she recovered enough energy, she began preparing dinner. She had craved river snails for ages, and the wait was finally over. Back in the kitchen, she checked the basin. The water stayed clear, meaning the snails had finished purging sand. She poured out the water and transferred all the snails to the sink. She scrubbed green algae off each shell with a brush until the gray shell surface showed through. Then she took scissors and neatly cut off the tip of each shell. This made it easier to suck out the meat and allowed spicy sauce to seep inside. Once prepared, she placed the snails in a bamboo basket to drain. She lit dry firewood in the stove, heating the iron wok and pouring in cooking oil. Smashed garlic cloves, sliced ginger, crushed dried chili peppers, and half a block of hot pot base went into the wok. She simmered them gently to release rich, spicy aromas. She tipped all the drained snails into the wok and stirred rapidly with a spatula. The shells clinked against one another. When most shell openings parted slightly, she poured in half a pot of water and covered the wok to simmer and lock in flavor. After some time, she lifted the lid. Intense savory spicy fragrance spread across the courtyard. She added a pinch of fine salt, splashed seasoning along the wok rim, and stirred vigorously to reduce the sauce. Glossy thick spicy coating clung to every snail. She tossed in green and red chili strips before plating. The stir-fried river snails glistened with oil, and the aroma alone stirred appetite. She stored the snails in her storage and moved on to cook another dish. The 3 to 4 kilos of giant stream catfish she had kept days prior would become boiled fish with pickled cabbage. She held the fish steady, scraped off scales against their growth direction with a sharp knife, trimmed the fins, cut open the belly, and removed all innards and black membrane. She rinsed the fish thoroughly. With quick strokes, she sliced even pieces of white fish flesh. She seasoned the fillets with ginger and salt to remove fishy odors, and chopped the firm bones into segments for soup stock. She also cut pickled cabbage into long strips. She heated oil in the wok, sautéed ginger, garlic, and pickled cabbage, added fish bones, and fried them until lightly golden. She poured in boiling hot water and simmered over high heat until the soup turned creamy white. Ping'an used a strainer to remove bone fragments, turned the flame low, and slid the marinated fish fillets gently into the broth. When the fillets curled and cooked through, she added wild vegetables she had picked earlier, simmering them for 2 or 3 boils. Green vegetables floated atop the milky soup, adding fresh herbal aroma to balance the richness of the fish. Warm lamplight glowed softly. Ping'an sat on a chair. She picked up an oily snail first, twisting the shell and sucking lightly. Spicy broth infused with ginger and chili slipped down her throat, followed by tender, springy snail meat. Savory spiciness spread across her tongue. She smiled contentedly. She ate more than half the bowl of snails before the heat grew noticeable. She spooned up boiled fish with pickled cabbage. The soft fish soaked in tangy soup melted on her tongue. The crisp, sour pickled cabbage cut through fishy taste and highlighted the sweetness of the meat. She took a bite of tender boiled wild vegetables. Their fresh green flavor eased the heavy spiciness. After several mouthfuls, the weariness from her day of hiking faded away. Xiaohei squatted by her feet, catching pieces of fish and bones she tossed down. His teeth were strong enough to handle bones safely, so Ping'an fed them to him without worry. After finishing the bowl of snails and boiled fish, her stomach felt moderately full. Yet, she wanted staple food to complete the meal. She took dried noodles from her storage and cooked them in the leftover creamy soup to make noodle soup with pickled cabbage fish. Once the broth boiled again, she fished out noodles soaked in tangy soup and ate the warm noodle soup. Savory sour broth wrapped around chewy noodles, warmth traveling from her throat down into her stomach. Only after finishing the large bowl did Ping-An feel fully satisfied. She returned to the kitchen, stored leftover snails in her space, then cooked another big bowl of noodles plus 3 large chicken drumsticks. Once cooled, she set them in Xiaohei's bowl. Xiaohei snapped up one drumstick with his tongue, chewing and swallowing quickly. He polished off the whole bowl of noodles, licking his lips and gazing at Ping-An expectantly. Ping-An laughed and scratched his head, fetching more prepared food from storage to feed him. Fish scales had splattered onto the kitchen walls while she prepared the catfish. Ping-An washed the dishes and wiped the walls repeatedly with a cloth until clean. With no urgent tasks left, night wind carrying faint herbal scents drifted over the courtyard walls. Ping-An strolled slowly beneath the moonlight. Xiaohei noticed her movement and rose quickly from under the eaves, stepping lightly beside her. Sometimes he circled around her ankles, sometimes staring toward the dark forest beyond the courtyard. After walking for over 10 minutes and easing her full stomach, Ping-An headed to the bathing room. She brushed her teeth and washed her face first. She mixed warm water and washed her sweat-soaked hair 3 times. Then she filled the large wooden tub and enjoyed a comfortable hot bath. After drying herself, she put on silk pajamas, which felt cool and smooth against her skin. She dried her hair, walked upstairs to the 2nd floor, and opened her diary to record the day. I finally got to eat the stir-fried snails I've been craving. They taste incredible. How can food be this delicious? I love spicy stir-fried river snails forever. I picked lots of wild fruit too, far tastier than greenhouse produce. If I get the chance someday, I can sell some of the fruit stored in my space and gather more wild fruits to stock up. Maybe I can try brewing wild grape wine. I already possess 87 special items. After my next check-in, I will have 90. Yet panic lingered in her heart. I kept myself busy all day to distract myself, but anxious thoughts rush in the moment I pause and think about the system disappearing. Recently, I have been delaying check-ins late each night, hoping it might linger a little longer. Still, this day will inevitably arrive. She finished writing the last line and set her black pen gently on the wooden desk. The pen tapped against the surface with a clear, sharp clack. The sound echoed loudly in the silent bedroom. Her fingers stiffened, and her unease intensified. Ping-An sat rigidly in her chair, trembling as she opened the light screen. Pale light rippled in the air before her, and glaring red countdown numbers floated above the desk, cold and distinct in her sight. Countdown. 0 hours 28 minutes and 46 seconds. Every tick of the timer struck her taut nerves. After much hesitation, she tapped to complete the check-in. Ding! Congratulations! You receive Substitute Doll ×1, Unknown Potion ×1. Ping-An felt confused to receive only 2 rewards. When she opened their descriptions, understanding slowly dawned on her. Substitute Doll can shield the bearer from 3 fatal attacks. Unknown Potion can boost Affinity Euro, Pound. The Substitute Doll was unbelievably powerful. The Unknown Potion's description was garbled symbols. Ping-An could not decipher its exact function, but she trusted the system meant her no harm. She clicked to claim the rewards. Pale white light swirled and condensed into a palm-sized doll before the desk. The doll wore plain simple clothing, its features faintly modeled after her own. It hovered mid-air wrapped in soft radiance. She reached out tentatively and touched the glow. The doll turned into a faint streak of white light and merged into her body. Ping-An instantly sensed 3 layers of protection surrounding her, and her restless anxiety calmed. After the substitute doll vanished into her form, the remaining light gathered again to form a small translucent jade gourd. The jade gourd shimmered softly, bound with thin silver cord around its neck. Clear unknown liquid sealed inside floated in front of the desk. At the same time, text appeared slowly on the light screen. The potion sealed within the gourd holds mysterious effects. Keep it safely and open only when facing difficult crises in the future. She lifted the cool, smooth gourd into her palm. Running her fingers over the polished surface, she could feel the liquid shift gently inside. She untied the cord and sniffed. A faint, clean herbal fragrance drifted out, revealing no clear clue to its properties. This parting gift carried a quiet sense of anticipation. Ping-An stored the jade gourd inside her storage space. The hollow feeling brought on by the system's upcoming departure softened a little. Farewell. May this modest protection guard you through all your days. As Ping-An finished reading the words, the light screen shattered like mist caught in wind, dissolving into countless glowing specks and vanishing. Partings always brought sorrow. She could feel encouragement and well wishes within that message, as if an old trusted friend was bidding her goodbye. Ping pulled the quilt over herself, eager to fall asleep, yet those two sentences echoed endlessly in her mind, stirring chaos inside her heart. She sat up. If sleep eluded her, she would not force it. It had been a long while since she had pulled an all-nighter. She might as well stay awake until dawn. Adjusting her pajamas, she opened the door and walked into the second-floor living room. Retrieving shelving units from her spatial storage, she lined them against the blank wall in a staggered arrangement. Modeled after the zoning layout of street-side supermarkets, she set out to build a private snack convenience store that belonged solely to her. The broad bottom shelf became the beverage zone. She took out her stock from the space and neatly arranged them: carbonated sodas, sweet bottled fruit drinks, rich milk, and carton lactic acid beverages lined up in orderly rows. Canned herbal tea, coffee, and sparkling drinks were stacked in piles. Glass bottles of fruit wine, honey water, and fresh mineral water sat separately in a side corner, caps facing outwards for easy access whenever she needed a drink. The middle shelf was filled with all kinds of puffed snacks. Large bags of potato chips, rice crackers, and crispy shrimp strips were freed from their outer packaging and stacked into neat blocks. Crispy rice cakes, popcorn, and hollow potato rolls were sorted by type. Long crispy puff sticks and small packs of instant noodles lay side by side, perfectly replicating a supermarket's puffed snack section, ready for her to grab and crunch at will. The shelf above was reserved for durable roasted nuts and dried goods. Paper bags of sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, and watermelon seeds were placed in a straight line. Sealed glass jars held shelled walnut kernels, almonds, pistachios, and pine nuts. Wild sour jujubes and dried Chinese honey locust fruits she had picked during the day sat among them. Wild mountain fruits paired well with commercially sourced nuts, ideal for casual snacking. The rear half of the top shelf served as an emergency instant food zone. Cartons of bucket noodles, bagged dried noodles, self-heated rice, and instant snail noodles were stacked neatly. Various seasoning packets and dehydrated vegetable packs were sorted into categories. Hanging racks and leftover gaps on the shelves were stuffed with candies, soft mochi, filled biscuits, wafer rolls, vacuum-packed braised snacks, pickled chicken feet, and fish tofu. Long fruit lollipops and hard candies were placed in clear glass jars in prominent positions. In less than half the night, the empty shelving units were brimming with food, so dazzling it looked as if a small urban convenience store had been moved into this mountain house deep in the wilderness. Once the snack shelves were fully organized, Ping summoned a wide, smoothly polished solid wood table from her storage space. She fetched 2 wooden armchairs fitted with soft padded cushions and set them beside the shelves near the window where natural light was best. In this simple way, she created a cozy leisure nook. She spread a thick flannel blanket over the chair seats and let half a sheer gauze curtain hang by the window. It blocked chilly crosswinds at night while letting faint starlight filter onto the tabletop. On an empty low cabinet beside the resting area, she set down an empty ceramic plate to hold seed husks and fruit pits, which she would empty into the rubbish bin once full. After finishing all the work, Ping pulled out one cushioned chair and sat down. Resting her elbows on the wooden table, she lifted her gaze to face the abundant snack shelves behind her. She reached for a bucket of golden soup beef-flavored instant noodles, tore open the packaging, poured in all the seasoning sachets, added hot water, and replaced the lid to wait 5 minutes. From the shelves, she also grabbed chicken feet, spicy strips, marinated eggs, potato chips, and more, eating while waiting for the noodles to soak. In the past, she would have scrolled short videos on her phone while eating, yet such luxuries were unavailable now. Instead, she picked up a novel and read as she ate. Once she finished her meal, restlessness lingered. She stripped the bed linens from her bedroom and carried them downstairs to wash by hand. Life without a washing machine was inconvenient. Water-soaked bedding was difficult to rinse clean, yet she possessed considerable strength now. After half an hour of hard work, she washed and wrung them dry. She carried the basin into the yard and hung the linens on the clothesline, straightening every edge. She could not stand uneven wrinkles, being a creature of order. Lastly, she grabbed a broom and mop and thoroughly cleaned every corner of the first, second, and third floors. Though she had labored through most of the night, Ping still felt wide awake. Standing at the hall doorway, she racked her brain for another task. Spotting shoes scattered randomly by the entrance, she suddenly snapped her fingers, an idea striking her. She rummaged inside her spatial storage for a solid wooden shoe rack. To conserve space, she nested furniture inside one another, making it slightly troublesome to retrieve. She placed the sturdy wooden shoe rack steadily beside the porch pillar sheltered from rain. The house was spacious, and she usually kicked her shoes off casually by the door or in the yard, but now was the perfect chance to tidy them up. She arranged her thick-soled cloth boots for mountain treks, lightweight walking shoes, shower slippers, and soft indoor cloth shoes on separate tiers, all lined up neatly with toes facing inward. Stepping back inside, she fetched an open basket woven from rough rattan and set it in the corner by the bathroom door. From then on, clothing stained with mountain dust, sweat, and mud would no longer be tossed onto sofas. The house would stay tidy. With these two tasks complete, she walked to the empty space next to the bathroom and erected a set of closed double-layer wooden cabinets against the blank wall. This area would hold her pajamas for all seasons. She sorted them carefully by season from top to bottom. The upper cabinet stored her autumn nightwear, breathable Ramy cotton, pure cotton, and silk nightgowns and sets, over 10 pieces hanging tidily. The lower cabinet held winter pajamas, thick fleece robes, cotton-lined sleepwear, and flannel sets. She had considered storing heavy padded loungewear here, yet they would crowd the space and ruin the neat appearance, so she stowed them away in storage. Both layers were filled with autumn and winter sleepwear. After bathing, she could change directly into nightclothes, creating a smooth, practical layout. Ping looked over the main hall and grew tired of the sofa's original color. She retrieved a soft sofa cover from her space. It featured a gentle mint green base, fresh and pleasing to the eye. The fabric bore subtle pale white patterns, swirling delicate vine scrolls dotted with faint outlines of small daisies. The lines were elegant and restrained, never garish. She carefully fitted the full set of covers over the sofa, smoothing out wrinkles across the seat cushions, backrests, and armrests. The plain sofa instantly took on a warm, gentle aura. She put away the thermos flask on the table and set out an elegant set of plain white porcelain teaware, a plump flat teapot, several moderate-sized translucent cups resting upon a shallow porcelain tea tray. Ping was thoroughly satisfied with her handiwork. She added another small cabinet stocked with snacks. She headed to the kitchen, repurposing a large jar as a rice container, filling it with rice, covering the lid and placing it on the storage shelf. Red dates, mixed grains, rock sugar, dried chilies, and other ingredients were sealed inside small glass bottles and lined up. Firewood had run out, so she stacked 2 bundles neatly against the wall. Climbing the stairs to the second floor, Ping moved the wardrobe from bedroom 1 into the living room. She believed a bedroom existed solely for sleep and should only contain items connected to rest. Following the same logic, she filled one living room wardrobe with her everyday clothing. The wardrobe held short-sleeved shirts, shorts, long-sleeved tops, long trousers, and windbreakers. The other wardrobe held thicker attire, thermal undershirts, long thermal trousers, and cotton coats. Large compartment cabinets housed 4 sets of beautiful spare bed linens, while smaller cubbies stored underwear. She planned to keep socks downstairs later. Placing them here felt inappropriate beside other garments. On the top shelf rested 2 quilts and blankets. Observing the neatly packed cabinet, she felt immense satisfaction typical of those who loved stockpiling supplies. Ping decided the first and second floors met all her needs. She would leave the 3rd floor empty for now, with plenty of time to plan it in the future. She had long dreamed of building a study, yet neither of the lower 2 floors suited her vision. She imagined an attic-style study beneath a pointed roof, connected by a small wooden bridge to an ancient pavilion overlooking a fish pond. Lotus flowers would grow in the pond, bamboo planted all around. Lanterns would hang beneath the pavilion's upturned eaves, with sheer gauze draping from the rafters. Ping could clearly picture the scene in her mind. She would stroll over the wooden arch bridge and gaze upon the sheer curtains hanging around the pavilion. Light and translucent, the gauze lacked the oppressive weight of thick cloth partitions, softly separating the pavilion from the outside world. Mountain winds carried lotus fragrance sweeping through the pavilion, making the gauze flutter. Sometimes it brushed carved pillars, other times drifting toward the pond surface. Warm light from the 4 lanterns beneath the eaves spilled gently through the fabric. Crossing the wooden bridge, she would sit on a cushioned couch within the pavilion and read unhurriedly, a pot of hot tea beside her desk. When tired, she could dip her hands in the water to play with koi fish or feed them. Unfortunately, such features could not be generated alongside the house. She would need to build everything herself or find others to help, which would take a great deal of time. It was a long-term goal. The house had solid basic fittings, yet still lacked warmth. When dawn arrived, she intended to plant flowers and trees and place wild blooms inside vases. A faint pale glow slowly spread across the dark night outside the window, the sky tinted with the dim light before sunrise. Ping stretched her body after the night's labor. She had worked tirelessly like an ox without realizing. She walked to the main hall for water, drinking from the new porcelain cup she had brought out the previous night. After several gulps, she held the delicate little cup and muttered, "It looks lovely, yet it cannot hold enough water to drink my fill." Gazing out at the cool dawn sky, a sudden thought arose. She wanted to watch the sunrise. She recalled her university days. Most classmates loved hiking overnight up mountains such as Huangshan and Laojun Mountain. Afterwards, they posted photos online, clad in windbreakers, hats, and sunglasses, holding drinks, with a red sun rising slowly behind them. Ping had traveled a few times herself, yet only visited cities famous for food, such as places known for barbecue and sour soup hot pot. She spent nearly all her money on meals, and had never truly stopped to admire sunrises and natural scenery. With that thought, she wasted no time. She quickly changed into durable long sleeves and long trousers, tightening the cuffs and tucking trouser legs into socks before slipping on lightweight trainers. She slung a small bamboo basket over her back and placed a moonlight herb plant inside. It effectively repelled snakes, rodents, and insects, keeping mosquitoes at bay. Judging by the sky, the sun would rise within 1.5 to 2 hours. On impulse, a brand new electric tricycle materialized on the courtyard pavement. Ping sat on the tricycle and twisted the throttle. The battery was fully charged. Hearing the noise, Xiaohei beneath the eaves lit up with excitement. Wagging his fluffy tail, he darted to her feet and jumped onto the footrest of the vehicle. Woof woof woof. Ping smiled at the puppy's enthusiasm. He grew giddy after only a month without riding the tricycle. She stepped down to unlock the main gate, drove the vehicle outside, locked the gate again, and settled back on the tricycle. One foot pressed the brake as she twisted the throttle. "Hold tight, Xiaohei. We're off." Whoosh! Cool damp wind rushed against her face, nearly blinding her, yet she did not slow down. She felt giddy with excitement, desperate to shout aloud. The low hum of the engine cut through the quiet wilderness. Soon she parked on an overgrown clearing at the foot of the mountain and climbed out, with Xiaohei jumping down after her. She stored the tricycle away and looked toward the mountains stretching ahead. Compared with the towering ranges surrounding it, this wild mountain stood shorter with gentle slopes. Its main peak lay not far from the foothills. Fish belly white light had appeared along the horizon. Ping roughly estimated the walking time and relaxed. At the mountain's height, a steady climb would let her reach the summit in time for the first sunlight of dawn. She patted Xiaohei gently on the head and whispered, "We're climbing up to watch the sunrise." Xiaohei whined excitedly yet obediently, staying close beside her, matching her pace. The ascent began. She held a walking stick in her left hand, tapping the ground, grass, and slopes ahead before every step. This helped her test whether the soil was slippery or loose to avoid falls, while brushing aside tall grass for a clear view. Along the trail, tangled vines and thorny bushes blocked the path. With one twist of her wrist, her large blade sliced cleanly through obstacles. Sharp cracking sounds echoed through the woodland as she carved out a narrow temporary passage through thick vegetation. "Haha, I'm quite capable." Ping marveled at her own strength. Being powerful truly made life easier. Dew-covered grass brushed against her clothes, yet the chill only touched the fabric. Her long sleeves and trousers protected her limbs, and the moonlight herb kept insects far away, unable to reach exposed skin. Though the slope was not steep, hazards abounded. Thick rotting leaves made the ground slippery, exposed tree roots risked tripping her, and slanted banks coated in morning dew were slick. Ping leaned on her walking stick for balance, blade ready at her side. When facing steeper sections, she grabbed tough mountain vines to advance steadily, her back straight as if she had wandered wild trails all her life. She owed this stamina entirely to the strength-enhancing pills and body-cleansing potions. Xiaohei proved sharp and sensible. He bounded ahead to sniff out dangers, pushing low bushes aside to widen the path for his owner. The forest lay silent. Only the tapping of the walking stick, crisp sound of branches being cut, rustle of fallen leaves underfoot, and sigh of wind through trees broke the quiet. The atmosphere felt reminiscent of horror films. Ping wondered how she dared climb alone so early. Could wild predators be out hunting? Huff, huff. Don't let your imagination frighten you. She patted her chest and continued forward. Higher up, low shrubs and tangled vines thinned. Distant mountain outlines wrapped in morning mist faded from deep black into soft layers of blue-gray, stretching toward the pale sky. Ping eased up on cutting vegetation and stared toward the east, where the sky brightened. Her footsteps remained steady and brisk. In just over an hour, knife in hand and walking stick supporting her, she stepped onto the flat stone ledge atop the mountain shrouded in cool mist. She brushed grass fragments from her shoulders and called Xiao He to her side. No one else occupied the open ledge. Beneath them swirled milky sea of mist, and rolling mountain ranges slumbered beneath thin dawn haze, waiting for daylight to break. Ping retrieved food and water from her storage, eating and drinking as she waited. She also set out water and snacks for Xiao He. The fish belly white glow in the eastern sky spread wider. Threads of pale pink dawn appeared, stretching along cloud textures, gradually blending with orange and golden hues to trace soft, colorful rims around jagged mountain peaks. Mist all around turned pale peach, and even the cool mountain wind carried warmth. Moments later, a bright yet gentle streak of golden-red light burst through heavy cloud cover. First appeared a thin, delicate sliver of golden rim, then half a round warm red sun slowly rose, pushing aside piled cloud layers. The instant the full sun crested the mountain ridge, countless golden rays surged downward, piercing the swirling morning mist and coating the entire wilderness and forests in translucent gilded light. The previously gray, silent mountain landscape awakened by sunrise. Plants across the hills unfurled leaves toward sunlight, and the misty sea shimmered with flecks of gold. The grand gentle sight left her lost for words. Ping raised a hand to shield herself from the warm glow, a relaxed smile spreading across her face. The unease weighing on her heart the night before, the emptiness after parting, and anxiety about her lonely future all melted away beneath the newly risen sun. She bent down and stroked Xiao He's fluffy head, her fingers brushing his soft ears. Her heart felt open and unburdened. After watching the sunrise for a long while, sunlight spilled fully over the mountaintop. Ping called Xiao He and headed down along the trail she had cleared earlier. No need to hack new paths on the return trip, yet she kept hold of the blade for safety. On the way down, she spotted numerous wild mushrooms and placed them all into her bamboo basket. She also collected fallen branches and attractive stones into her spatial storage. She planned to pave a beautiful stone path, and these rocks might prove useful. When sunlight became brilliant, woman and dog finally reached the mountain foot. She summoned the electric tricycle and hurried back to her mountain villa. Ping stored the tricycle, unlocked the courtyard gate, and stepped inside, closing it securely. She rubbed her aching legs and headed for the bathroom to take a hot bath. She casually removed clothes dusted with dirt and dew, only to discover her menstruation had arrived. In past years, every cycle brought sharp lower abdominal cramps starting 2 days ahead of time. Once her period began, the pain left her soaked in cold sweats, too weak to rise from bed even to fetch water. Painkillers worked for the first few years, yet after taking them continuously for 3 or 4 years, their effect faded drastically. Summer cycles felt especially tough. Perspiration made every trip to the restroom an ordeal. She could endure it if she happened to have time off work, otherwise she had to push through despite the discomfort. Technology had advanced greatly, yet effective medicines for menstrual pain remained elusive. Worse still, unsafe counterfeit health products circulated widely. Admittedly, conditions for modern women had improved, and preference for sons was slowly fading. Even so, gender discrimination persisted in society, clearly visible in recruitment and family environments. Once she had hoped to witness this bias vanish within her lifetime. She dreamed of a future where women faced no discrimination, no longer suffered from menstrual pain and the hardships of childbirth, where technology might one day create equipment to ease such burdens. It was nothing but a fantasy. Ping'an brushed aside her wistful thoughts. Since she could not take a sitz bath during her menstrual period, she washed herself and her hair under running warm water. After drying off, she walked over to the newly placed large wardrobe and changed into a long set of pajamas before heading into the kitchen. She planned to make a nourishing breakfast to soothe her abdomen and replenish her energy. She poured an appropriate amount of water into a clay casserole, tossed in several plump red dates, a small handful of sticky longans, and a scoop of well-rinsed glutinous rice. Then simmered everything on low heat to make thick, fragrant longan and red date glutinous rice congee. The pot bubbled gently, sending up warm white steam. The sweet aroma of jujubes blended with the soft scent of glutinous rice, filling the whole kitchen. While waiting for the congee to cook, she took a lump of brown sugar out of her spatial storage, cut off a small piece, and dissolved it in warm water to make light brown sugar syrup. She then placed 2 eggs in a small bamboo steamer to make tender steamed eggs, drizzling just a drop or 2 of light soy sauce over them once they were done to enhance the flavor. In addition to the warm congee, she took out several brown sugar steamed buns and reheated them lightly in the steamer. When she split one open, she saw the soft outer dough wrapped with a faint sweet brown sugar filling. The smell alone whetted her appetite. Ping'an scooped up a spoonful of congee. The thick, creamy rice slid down her throat, and warmth spread slowly from her esophagus down into her stomach. The brown sugar bun was soft and sweet, the steamed egg so delicate it melted on her tongue, and a sip of the warm syrup soothed her throat. Xiuhei lay quietly on the ground, staring up at her with round, hopeful eyes. Ping'an placed 2 large steamed buns in his bowl. The puppy wagged his tail as she slowly finished her breakfast. After tidying the kitchen, drowsiness washed over her. Yawning, Ping'an climbed to the second floor, laid a thin mat on the bed, and prepared to get some proper rest. Though her body had been tempered and felt fine, she saw no reason to push herself when conditions allowed. She decided to grant herself a 7-day break, and she would do the same every month from then on. Ping'an pulled a thin quilt over herself and fell into a deep sleep. She slept straight through until dusk. She had not eaten enough that morning, and now that she had woken up, she felt ravenous enough to eat an ox. Ping'an took out a tender chunk of lamb with a balanced mix of fat and lean meat and cut it into cubes. She put the meat into cold water with slices of ginger to blanch away the blood foam. After skimming off all the scum, she fished the lamb out, rinsed it with warm water, and drained it. She laid smashed ginger roots, sections of green onion, and pitted red dates at the bottom of the casserole. She arranged the lamb cubes on top and poured in hot water to cover all the ingredients. She covered the pot tightly and simmered the meat gently in the stove for an hour. Once the lamb was partially tender, she peeled a white radish and cut it into thick irregular chunks. She added them to the casserole to simmer on low heat for another 40 minutes. Slow, prolonged cooking helped mellow out the radish's cool properties. After 40 minutes, the lamb stew was ready. Ping'an sprinkled in some salt, stirred well, and carried the casserole straight to the dining table. She enjoyed a hearty bowl of lamb and white radish soup. Over those 7 days, she slept until late morning every day. After eating, she would curl up on the sofa to read. When her eyes grew tired, she opened the window to admire the scenery. Occasionally, when the mood struck her, she painted ink landscapes. She also made various flavors of milk snacks, which paired perfectly with other small treats. When the sun was not too harsh, she spread a mat in the courtyard to sun her back. Whenever hunger hit, she could head out for an impromptu picnic. Apart from cooking and washing dishes, Ping'an barely did any heavy work those days. She ate, rested, amused herself, and slept constantly. Living without a mobile phone made her feel as if she might grow mold. Time slipped by quickly. Fully refreshed after days of rest, brimming with energy, Ping'an set out to tackle a major project she had put off earlier. She took wild fruits she had picked some time ago out of her spatial storage and laid them out in the yard. She planned to boil wild jujubes, wild hawthorns, and Hovenia dulcis into jam. She fetched 3 hollow bamboo sieves. The last time she had only roughly gathered intact fruit. Now she intended to sort every piece carefully by hand. No living creatures could survive inside her storage space. Any tiny insects inside the fruit had died the moment the fruit was stored. So Ping'an had no fear of bugs crawling out. She spread a handful of glossy crimson wild jujubes in her palm and examined each one. Any fruit marked with wormholes, dark blemishes, or mold was tossed into the rubbish bin. She kept only fully ripe jujubes with unbroken skins, even rich red color and firm, plump flesh. Once sorting was finished, she mixed a basin of light salt water and soaked the selected jujubes. She gently rubbed each fruit along the fine lines of its skin to wash away dust and grass debris. After several rinses, she laid the jujubes evenly on bamboo sieves under the eaves to air dry completely. To make good jam, there must not be any residual moisture at all. Next, she plucked the dry flower calyxes from the tops of fiery orange wild hawthorns. With a sharp knife, she sliced each fruit in half and inspected them thoroughly inside and out. Any hawthorn with wormholes, brown hollowed cores eaten by pests, or rotten, mushy flesh was discarded. She gathered the sound fruit, then used a soft, small brush to scrub dirt from the creases in their skins. She rinsed them clean and set them aside to drain. Finally came the Hovenia dulcis. Pingen broke open each twisted, oddly shaped stalk fruit to check the inside. An unbroken outer surface was not enough. Any stalk with brown, moldy cores or insect tunnels was thrown away. For the good ones, she tore off dry thin stalks, washed them, and drained them for later use. She stretched her sore waist after bending over for so long, then carried a large metal basin for washing vegetables and a solid wooden rolling pin out from the kitchen. She placed the fully dried wild jujubes into the metal basin in batches. Gripping the rolling pin, she pressed down gently with its rounded tip, stopping as soon as she heard the crisp crack of splitting skins. She pried open the cracked shells, patiently picking out the small, hard jujube stones and throwing them away. She collected the soft crimson flesh in a white porcelain bowl. For a few tough-skinned fruits that refused to split easily, Pingen did not bother pounding them one by one and simply tossed them aside. All the pitted jujube flesh went back into the metal basin. Holding the rolling pin horizontally, she rolled and pressed back and forth along the basin bottom. Most of the flesh was crushed into smooth, seedless puree, while a small portion was roughly pounded into fibrous coarse paste. It was deliberately left to add texture when eaten. She leaned closer and breathed in the sharp, strong sour scent. She knew the natural sweetness of Hovenia dulcis alone would not balance such intense tartness. So she scooped a small jar of locust honey and mixed a portion into the jujube puree as a base, saving the rest of the sweetener to add gradually while boiling the combined jam. Pingen poured the jujube puree into a thick-bottomed iron pot and added a little mineral water to thin it slightly. She kept only 2 or 3 embers in the stove for very low heat, stirring constantly clockwise along the pot base with a wide wooden spoon to stop it burning. After simmering for half an hour, the moisture evaporated and the puree thickened enough to cling to the spoon. She scooped it into sterilized porcelain jars to store temporarily as her sour flavor base. Pingen divided the hawthorns into 2 portions. She stored one portion in her space to make sugar-coated hawthorn skewers. The other half was split into 2 piles. Soft, overripe hawthorn flesh went into the metal basin. She pounded it repeatedly with the rolling pin into bright, clear coarse hawthorn puree. Firm, bright hawthorn fruits were chopped into small dices, wrapped in clean gauze to drain their juice. They were reserved as fruity bits to dot the finished jam. She took another iron pot, added the hawthorn puree, and simmered it over gentle heat with constant stirring until it thickened and released its sharp sour aroma. She turned off the fire and let it cool before setting it beside the jujube base. Pingen used a knife to peel off the tough outer woody skin of the Hovenia dulcis and remove the hard central core. She kept only the tan-soft flesh filled with sweet juice. All the sweet, tender flesh went into the metal basin. She held the rolling pin vertically and pounded vigorously, grinding it into smooth, thick Hovenia dulcis pulp. It was the primary natural sweetener for the whole batch of jam, requiring no extra sugar. Pingen carried out the largest thick-bottomed cast iron pot from her storage space. First, she poured in the cooled jujube base and hawthorn puree, adding half a spoonful of water to adjust consistency. She turned the stove to mild, gentle heat and stirred non-stop from the bottom to prevent the thick fruit paste from scorching. Once the 2 sour purees blended and began to bubble, she poured in all the pounded Hovenia dulcis pulp and continued stirring clockwise, letting its rich honeyed sweetness slowly merge with the 2 sharp fruit sours. After simmering a while, she scooped up a little paste to taste the acidity. She added locust honey bit by bit to balance the flavors. This softened the fierce tang of wild jujubes and the bright sourness of hawthorn without erasing the refreshing natural tartness of the fruit. It created distinct layers of sweet and sour. As the mixed fruit paste lost its runny texture and thickened into translucent amber syrup, she added the drained hawthorn dices and simmered for another 15 minutes, letting the fruit chunks soak up the complex surrounding fruit aromas. Pingen lifted a spoonful of jam. The amber syrup stretched into long, clear threads, slowly dripping back into the pot to form smooth round beads, the perfect sign that it was ready. She extinguished the stove fire and let the hot jam cool slightly in the pot before ladling it into earthen jars while still warm. She laid 2 layers of breathable oil paper over each jar mouth to block dampness and dust, pressed on heavy ceramic lids, then tied the tops tightly with cloth. The jars were stored in a cool, shaded corner of the kitchen. Western-style simple meals had been popular online once. She had often watched videos back then, warm toasted bread spread with jam, sprinkled with walnut kernels, paired with a neatly fried egg, a cup of hot milk or fruit smoothie arranged on an elegant plate, finished off with a few blueberries as decoration. She had loved the look of those meals but never tried making them herself. Anyone who had attended school knew how easily hunger struck halfway through morning classes. A small slice of bread and milk simply could not keep one full. Tired after all that work, she was hungry. She quickly cooked a bowl of noodles, topped with 2 poached eggs. Fresh green chopped spring onions were scattered lightly over the eggs and broth, and she finished with a drop of sesame oil. A simple clear noodle soup with poached eggs was ready. As Pingyan sat eating at the dining table, her mind wandered to the winemaking process she had read about. She had no yeast cake, yet she possessed nearly every other necessary ingredient. She planned to look through her books after the meal to find a straightforward winemaking method. And of course, she needed a recipe for sugar-coated hawthorn skewers too. A few mouthfuls of hot noodles chased away most of her weariness. Pingyan quickly cleared away the bowls, washed and dried them, then took out her books to read. After a long while, she closed the book and looked toward baskets of wild grapes stacked under the eaves, covered with a natural pale bloom. She had already made her plan. She would split this batch of grapes in half. One portion would be spread out to dry in the sun into long-lasting, tasty raisins. The other half she would turn into sweet fruit wine using ancient methods described in the book, relying on the natural wild yeast found in the white bloom on grape skins. Sitting on a stool, Pingyan patiently separated each grape cluster. She picked over every berry carefully, discarding any broken, moldy, or worm-eaten fruit. She kept only plump dark purple grapes with intact skins and unspoiled bloom. She spread the selected grapes evenly out to dry. The mild afternoon sunlight lingered gently, slowly drawing excess moisture out of the flesh. When dusk fell, she gathered the grapes indoors, spreading them out again the next morning once daylight arrived. She repeated this routine of laying them out by day and collecting them at dusk for 4 or 5 days. The originally plump wild grapes gradually shrank as they dehydrated, turning into glossy deep purple raisins with firm, chewy flesh. A thin layer of natural fruit bloom remained on the skins, releasing rich, concentrated honeyed fragrance when she leaned close. Pingyan stored the fully dried raisins in sterilized, dry glass jars and moved them to the snack shelf on the second floor. She could grab a handful any time she wanted a treat, whether reading indoors or heading into the mountains. With the raisins finished, Pingyan began preparing to brew grape wine. Winemaking could not tolerate raw water or oil. She proceeded with great care, carrying out a large coarse pottery wine jar, the wooden rolling pin she used for jam, thick gauze cloths, and wooden spoons. She rinsed everything repeatedly with boiling water and left them to air dry completely. Grapes used for winemaking must never be washed with water. Rinsing them would wash away the natural wild yeast on the skins responsible for fermentation. Pingyan took a dry soft brush and gently swept dust and dead leaves from the grapes set aside for wine. She placed the prepared grapes into the dry pottery jar in batches. Holding the rounded end of the rolling pin, she pressed lightly, cracking the skins to release juice without mashing the flesh and seeds to a pulp. Keeping skins and flesh mostly intact preserved the fruit aroma. Once the jar was filled with purple-red fruit pulp, she sprinkled in an appropriate amount of rock sugar and mixed gently with a water-free wooden spoon. The sugar balanced the strong natural sourness of wild grapes, helped stabilize yeast activity, and inhibited unwanted bacteria from turning the wine sour. She covered the jar mouth with 2 layers of coarse gauze to keep out insects and dust, placing the heavy lid loosely on top to leave a gap. This allowed gas produced during fermentation to escape and prevented the jar from splitting. She moved the wine jar to a cool, shaded spot in the main room and set herself a routine. The first 7 days were the critical primary fermentation stage. Every 2 days she lifted the gauze and pushed the floating grape skins down into the juice to stop them growing mold exposed to air. After 7 days of primary fermentation, Pingyan removed the gauze. She filtered all skins and seed residue out of the jar using double-layer fine gauze, keeping only clear, translucent purple grape juice, which she poured into another newly sterilized, dry pottery jar. This time she wrapped the jar mouth tightly in several layers of oilcloth and fastened the lid securely for a complete seal. She left it indoors for over 20 days of secondary slow fermentation, waiting quietly for the grape wine to mature. 20 days passed peacefully. From time to time Ping'an sniffed near the gap in the wrapping, catching a faint sweet grape scent without any sour or rotten odor. She knew the fermentation was proceeding smoothly. One afternoon after cleaning the house, she carried the wine jar to the table filled with anticipation. Xiuhei seemed to sense something new. He sat beside her feet, tail wagging, staring unblinkingly at the pottery jar with his bright black eyes. Ping'an untied the thick hemp rope wrapped around the outside and peeled away the waterproof oilcloth covering the jar mouth layer by layer. The moment she lifted the heavy ceramic lid, a rich, mellow fruit aroma mixed with soft, light wine scent surged outward, filling the whole courtyard instantly. Inside the jar, the liquid separated clearly. Fine fruit sediment settled at the bottom, while the upper layer was clear, deep purple wine that glowed gently when light fell on it. There were no cloudy mold flecks. The fermentation had hit just the right mark. It worked. Haha, I really am talented. I got it perfectly on my first try. She had prepared 2 stacked sheets of clean coarse gauze, which she stretched over the mouth of another boiling water sterilized, thoroughly dry empty pottery jar. She tilted the wine jar slowly, carefully straining out the clear upper grape juice. All leftover fruit pulp residue was trapped by the gauze, leaving only pure, mild fruit wine. Once all the liquid was filtered, Ping'an took a goblet and poured in a small amount of wine, swirling it gently. She imagined she was attending an elegant formal banquet. She brought the goblet close to her nose and breathed in the unique fresh sweetness of mountain wild grapes. She took a sip. It lacked the harsh bite of strong spirits. Smooth and lightly tart on entry, its acidity had been softened over time by fermentation, finishing with a subtle honeyed sweetness. The wine was light and mild. She disliked beer, Chinese liquor, and many other low-alcohol drinks. This newly brewed grape wine suited her perfectly, ideal for quiet drinking when she was alone. Ping'an filled a pot with wine. The remaining filtered wine was resealed tightly with oilcloth and returned to the cool area to age further. The longer it rested, the more harmoniously the fruit and wine aromas blended, becoming smoother and richer. Ping'an did not waste the grape pulp filtered out during straining. She collected it in a small bowl. She took 2 coarse grain wheat flatbreads out of her storage space and fetched the sealed pottery jar holding her amber mixed fruit jam. Using a clean silver spoon, she scooped a thick layer of sweet and sour jam and spread it evenly over the surface of the flatbread. The translucent orange-red paste clung to the bread, releasing a blend of wild jujube, hawthorn, and Hovenia dulcis fragrance all at once. She brought over the grape pulp left from straining the wine. Thick and purplish, it still carried a faint wine aroma. She spread a thin layer over the jam, creating full-layered streaks of amber red and deep purple. She gently pressed the 2 flatbreads together. A little filling oozed out along the edges, sweet fragrance tangled with faint wine aroma. Ping'an sat on the sofa, with Xiaohei lying quietly at her feet. She took a big bite of the filled flatbread. The coarse wheat flatbread was soft with a subtle grainy texture. The first flavor to hit her tongue was the rich, multi-layered sweet and sour of the mixed jam. The sharp, refreshing tang of wild jujube came first, followed by the clean fruitiness of hawthorn, ending with the warm, lingering honey sweetness of Hovenia dulcis, melting gently in her mouth. The grape pulp underneath was thick and chewy, carrying its own soft, fermented wine scent. The natural sweetness of wild grapes balanced the jam's sharp sourness. As she chewed, she could taste the tender texture of fine grape skins. The mild wine aroma was not overpowering. Instead, it made the fruit flavors feel brighter. The quiet grain taste of the flatbread formed the base, nicely cutting through the sweetness of the 2 fruit fillings. Sweet sour notes, honey fragrance, subtle wine aroma, and the rustic texture of whole grains unfolded layer by layer on her tongue. With every chew, the flavors melded more smoothly. The sweetness and sourness were well balanced without being cloying, and the faint wine aroma lingered pleasantly without any heaviness. Ping'an nibbled the filled flatbread slowly, occasionally sipping the grape wine she had worked so hard to make. She lifted her eyes toward the autumn mountain scenery outside the door, wrapped in serene peace far removed from the busy world. Smelling the delicious food, Xiaohei grew impatient and pawed at Ping'an's leg. Seeing this, Ping'an took out some snacks for him and poured a bottle of milk into his bowl. Early in the morning, mountain mist hung thick like sheer silk all around the blue brick cottage. A thin layer of frost dew covered the courtyard, bringing a light chill to the air. Pingin slept soundly until daybreak. She pushed off the quilt, stretched comfortably, and opened the window to breathe fresh morning air. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, and tidied her bed before walking into the kitchen to make breakfast. She poured 2 ladles of water into the pot, added cleaned and peeled sweet potatoes, and set up a steaming rack. She took 5 white steamed buns and 2 eggs from her storage space and placed them on top. She lit the stove. Firewood crackled for a quarter of an hour. Sweet wheat and yam fragrance drifted out through cracks in the pot lid. She lifted the cover. Steamed buns were fluffy and snow-white, eggs fully cooked, and sweet potato soup ready. Pingin served the food and walked to the dining table. She ate a simple breakfast paired with small pickled vegetables. After clearing the bowls and chopsticks, Xiaohe, who had been waiting by the door, trotted over at once, wagging his tail. Pingin pushed open the door and stepped outside. She strolled slowly along the open ground outside the yard with the puppy. The faint aroma of grass, mixed with dry leaves, lingered in the air, and her gaze naturally fell on the clump of ghost thorn by the gate. She had tended it carefully these days, watering it with stream water and applying fertilizer every day. Now the ghost thorn stood as tall as her hip, its branches and leaves thick and lush, lined with hard, sharp thorns. Vigorous as it looked, it had stopped growing for several days. No matter how much extra fertilizer or water she gave, the vines would send forth no new shoots or grow taller. As if trapped by an invisible boundary, Pingin halted and watched quietly. A bold thought suddenly surfaced in her mind. Ordinary soil and fertilizer could not nourish this strange plant. Perhaps she could try feeding it her own blood. Her body was as sturdy as an ox now. Losing some blood would cause her no discomfort, much less harm her foundation. Having made up her mind, Pingin retrieved a set of sterile blood collection tools from her spatial storage. Even after such a long break, her movements remained calm and deft. She successfully drew 400 milliliters of warm blood. She pressed the needle wound on her forearm for a few minutes until the bleeding stopped. Composed, she stood by the gate holding the container of blood. She knelt down. First, she slowly poured most of the blood over the green vines, letting the crimson liquid soak into every crevice of the branches. Then she used a small shovel to scrape away the topsoil around the roots and poured the remaining blood onto the tangled root system buried in the earth. The instant the last drop seeped into the soil, the entire thicket of ghost thorn burst into blazing scarlet light. Eerie crimson radiance surged upward from beneath the ground, wrapping the whole plant completely. Threads of dark red veins snaked rapidly across the originally pure green vines, red intertwined with green in an uncanny, striking pattern. The next moment, the vines visibly stretched and sprouted before her eyes. Their trunks thickened, tender new leaves unfurled one after another. Within moments, the bush grew noticeably taller, denser, and more formidable, its thorns glinting with cold sharpness. Pingin stood motionless nearby, observing the entire transformation carefully. She waited until the scarlet glow sank back into the roots, and the plant stabilized. Then she slung her bamboo basket over her shoulder and called Xiaohe to head into the mountains to gather seasonal wild vegetables. As she walked, she pondered the ghost thorn's transformation. She now knew for certain that it required blood to grow rapidly. She wondered if only her own blood worked, or if livestock blood would suffice. She might catch an animal to test this theory. Following the forest trail onward, she reached a sunlit slope with loose soil and suddenly spotted sprawling clusters of vegetation clinging to the ground. Common sowthistle. Pingin knelt to examine them. Though the outer older leaves were gray and withered, the new inner leaves were pale white and crisp. Perfect for harvesting. She set down her basket. Pinching the base of each plant's core, she pulled gently upward, and the whole clump of sowthistle came free from the soil. She shook off loose dirt from the roots, plucked off yellow withered outer leaves, and tossed them aside, keeping only 3 or 4 tender green leaves to drop into the bamboo basket. Once she finished harvesting this patch, she moved deeper into the woods. After walking a while, she found thick clusters of young ferns, growing along a shaded, damp gully. The ferns sprouted beside tree roots, their coiled shoots pushing through piles of fallen leaves. Wrapped in thin, dry brown husks, Pingin bent down. She pinched each tender fern shoot 2 inches below the tip and pulled lightly. The crisp stem snapped cleanly. She ran her thumb down the stalk to strip off the dry outer skin, leaving only the pale yellow curled crowns. She inspected each shoot closely, keeping those untouched by insects. She passed numerous Youngia japonica along the way, but left them untouched. She hoped to hunt game to bring back. Pinyin stowed the wild vegetables into her spatial storage and headed toward a water source to lie in ambush. She chose an excellent concealed spot downstream from the stream. Tangled vines and thick shrubs surrounded her, and a massive natural boulder blocked her figure and any reflection on the water's surface. Upstream lay an open stretch of clear, shallow water, a regular drinking spot for most mountain beasts. Land animals almost always preferred to drink there. Moreover, a stretch of water separated the upstream and downstream areas. The current flowed downward, so her scent would drift toward her hiding place, rather than traveling upstream against the current. An autumn valley wind blew through the mountains at that moment, sweeping from the rear woodland toward the lower stream. It carried her scent and Xiaohei's deeper into the woods behind them, never reaching the upstream watering hole. Truly fortune smiles on me. Pinyin felt confident about this ambush. She hoped for something large, like wild cattle, sheep, or deer. She could keep the meat for herself and use the blood to feed the ghost thorn. Dense, damp vegetation, fallen leaves, soil, and wild vines filled the air with rich woodland aromas around her hiding spot, masking her faint human scent completely. Even animals with sharp noses would not detect her. Pinyin pressed Xiaohei's head, signaling him to lie quietly by the tree roots. She held her black-scale sky bow, an arrow knocked between her fingers. A long cloth sack slung at her waist held more than 20 additional arrows. She huddled deep within the brush, suppressing all signs of her presence and waiting perfectly still. She lay in patient ambush for 2 sticks of incense time. Wind rustled through the trees, autumn leaves drifted down, and the only sound breaking the silence was the gurgling stream. Several rabbits and pheasants came by during her wait, but Pinyin thought them too small to bother shooting, remaining motionless. Just as she feared only small game would appear, heavy footsteps crushing fallen leaves echoed from the upstream woods, accompanied by deep, labored panting. Prey had arrived. Pinyin's heart leaped with excitement. With such heavy movement, there would surely be plenty of flesh and blood. She held her breath, staring intently upstream, guessing what animal approached. Pinyin nearly jumped out of her skin. She never imagined what emerged, a bear. She had watched many online videos warning that bears were intelligent. They might mimic human knocks on doors and attack once someone opened them unwary. Xiaohei sensed the threat and instantly arched his back, baring his fangs toward the front. Fearing the dog would bark, Pinyin quickly clamped his muzzle and gestured for silence. A huge adult brown bear lumbered out from the trees and stepped into the upstream shallows, lowering its head to drink greedily. The bear looked elderly, its powerfully bulky frame imposing. Thick shaggy brown fur covered its body, a hump rising prominently on its shoulders. Its limbs were thick as pillars, every step crushed layers of dead branches, radiating overwhelming menace. Its nose twitched occasionally as it sniffed the air, catching only the scents of plants and stream water. Unaware of danger, it continued drinking. After the bear drank for some time, 2 live figures patterned with gold and black emerged slowly from a valley fork far upstream. An adult tiger and its cub. Pinyin's eyes widened in shock. She had hoped for large prey, but never expected predators this formidable. Fear of tigers gripped her far more strongly than fear of the brown bear. When she attended school in town as a child, a traveling circus set up on the wide square every market season. Black tarpaulin wrapped the entire grounds, layered tightly so no one could peek inside. She had been endlessly curious about the mysterious circus hidden behind the cloth, yet she never asked her mother for money for a ticket. Instead, she squatted outside listening to cheers from within, imagining the show. Local children vividly recounted the performances: monkeys riding unicycles, peacocks spreading their tails, dancers with serpents, and tigers leaping through rings of fire. They spoke of how fierce and mighty the tigers were, yet obedient to commands. She believed all the tales except the last. She thought the tigers must have had their teeth pulled and been locked in cages. It sounded too fantastical otherwise. Then one noon after school, she cycled past the square. A truck parked on the road carried a steel cage in its cargo bed, holding a resting tiger. Pinyin thought it was a model and leaned closer for a better look. Suddenly, the supposedly sleeping tiger opened its jaws and roared. That single roar reverberated straight through her ears into her bones. Sharp teeth glinted in the sunlight. Terrified, she crashed to the ground with her bicycle and fled home in panic. When she grew older and browsed online, she learned that tiger roars carry tremendous resonant power, deep, forceful, and domineering, with astonishing penetrating strength. Few creatures could hear a tiger's roar without fear, unless certain of their safety. The tiger had only come to the water following its usual route. But the moment its amber eyes locked onto the brown bear by the shallows, its fur bristled. It lowered its back, tail quivering violently, and let out hoarse, suppressed, venomous growls from deep in its throat. Shohei trembled violently, urine soaking into the soil beneath him. Pinyin stroked his back to calm him. If the two beasts discovered them now, they would not survive. The tiger stared at the brown bear, consumed by blazing rage. It shared an irreconcilable blood feud with the bear. Long ago, fighting over territory, this same brown bear had relied on its tough hide and brute strength to overpower and kill the tiger's mate on the spot. Not long afterward, the bear tracked the scent to the unguarded den and brutally swatted 2 of the tiger's cubs to death. When the tiger returned with food, it arrived just as the bear moved to attack its last surviving cub. Driven to frenzy, it fought off the bear at the cost of a broken leg. Now it traveled everywhere with its sole remaining cub, terrified of further tragedy. Grief over her lost family burned into her soul. For more than half a year, she had roamed the mountains endlessly seeking vengeance. She had once slain one of the bear's cubs to avenge her own. Now they met face to face. There would be no testing, no retreat. Only a fight to the death. The fatal battle erupted the next instant. All the hatred accumulated over months exploded. The tiger pushed off with all 4 paws, launching itself forward like a golden arrow. Riding the momentum of its dive, razor-sharp forepaws aimed for the bear's vulnerable cheeks and eye sockets, moving so fast it left only a blurred streak. Caught off guard, the massive bear stiffened. It roared upward in alarm, startling flocks of birds into flight through the woods. At the critical moment, it wrenched its head aside. Its thick course fur barely shielded vital areas. A tearing sound echoed as tiger claws ripped 2 long gashes into the hide. Fresh scarlet blood soaked the brown fur and dripped from its jaw into the stream. Agony enraged the bear completely, compounded by grief for its own cub. It held nothing back. The enormous body charged forward, unleashing crushing weight. At the same time, it swung its palm-sized paw, sweeping through the air with hurricane force to strike the tiger's torso. A solid blow would shatter bones and rupture internal organs. The tiger was sharp-witted and consumed by hatred. It refused to meet the strike head-on. Mid-leap, it twisted its waist sharply, dodging narrowly past the paw to land behind the bear. Fangs flashed, sinking deep into the flesh of the bear's nape. Its claws clamped onto the bear's back. No matter how wildly the bear thrashed, the tiger refused to release its grip, tearing mouthfuls of bloodied fur. Mad with pain, the bear let loose a thunderous roar that echoed across the valley. It spun in circles, stamping the ground so hard stones and dirt sprayed everywhere. Then it slammed its back violently against a thick tree trunk. Boom! The heavy collision shook the tree and sent leaves swirling through the air. The tiger clinging to its back was jolted by the brutal impact. Its insides churned, a sharp ache stabbing its chest. It had no choice but to release its bite and leap to the ground. It landed steadily, lowering its body to catch its breath for a brief pause. Yet the tiger did not retreat. Killing intent blazed brighter in its eyes. During the short lull, the bear turned and advanced aggressively. It relied on sheer brute force rather than skill, charging forward, striking out with its paws, and lowering its head to ram. Every movement was crude and overwhelming. Each heavy paw smashing into the ground left shallow indentations. A direct hit meant certain death by broken bones. The tiger relied on unmatched speed to circle and harass, darting left and right, advancing and retreating like wind. It had noted the bear's weaknesses, slow turning and dwindling stamina. It struck repeatedly to wear its foe down. Sometimes it pounced to slash at the bear's face, forcing it to shield its eyes. Sometimes it bit precisely at soft flesh around the elbows to open new wounds. Sometimes it skimmed low to rake tender skin between the bear's paw pads. Every strike was cunning and lethal. One giant beast attacked with overwhelming brute force, the other struck swiftly and cleverly, fighting for revenge. The 2 overlords of the mountain range fought blinded by rage. Blood streamed continuously down the bear's spine, neck and shoulders, soaking its fur. The stream breeze carried the thick metallic scent of blood slowly upstream. But the bear grew more vicious as wounds multiplied. Enraged, it lunged forward, pinning the evasive tigress to the ground beneath its massive weight. Powerful arms locked around her torso to trap her. Its huge jaws lowered, aiming to bite her skull and end the fight. On the brink of death, the tiger unleashed desperate strength. Ignoring searing pain all over its body, it arched its waist violently, twisting its neck as far as possible. Fangs drove into a fresh wound on the bear's chest, tearing savagely with a shaking head. Its hind claws raked repeatedly at soft belly flesh, carving deep gashes. Agonizing spasms racked the bear. Its restraining grip slackened for a split second. That tiny opening was enough. The tiger struggled free from the hold, rolling backwards several meters. It stood rigid, gasping heavily, blood smearing its muzzle. Its golden fur was matted and soaked, yet its gaze remained ferocious, fixed firmly on the equally battered brown bear opposite. The bear bore countless cuts across its chest, back and cheeks, its thick fur flayed open in places. It appeared gravely wounded, panting hard with a mix of fury and wariness. Still it refused to leave the water source, locking eyes with the vengeance-driven tiger. Dust drifted and blood stained the clearing upstream. The two apex predators with a bloodied history fought on, every collision radiating primitive, savage, unyielding violence. Downstream behind the shrubs, Pinyin sat rigid. Though tempered by body refinement and clutching a deadly longbow, witnessing such raw, cruel mortal combat stirred surging fear inside her. Her breathing tightened, her limbs turning cold. A chill ran down her spine. Her fingers tightened around the bout until her knuckles whitened, her heart hammering close to bursting from her chest. She huddled tightly behind the boulder, not daring to move an inch, barely daring to breathe. Beside her, Xiaohe stood taut, tail clamped between his legs, trembling, unable even to whimper. Human and dog hid safely in the blind spot, watching the fateful, brutal struggle between tiger and bear rage on upstream. This chapter proved difficult to write. I spent an entire day planning the plot. Perspectives may shift somewhat, but I did my utmost to craft the scene. Cool mountain wind slipped through gaps in the branches, scattering dry fallen leaves across the ground. The mountain stream gurgled, clear water winding slowly over stones. Within the quiet valley, periodic bursts of ferocious roaring shook the forest, testimony to the battle's ferocity. The deadly beast fight on the stream bank clearing continued unabated. The adult tiger lowered its limbs, its muscles coiled with explosive power. Striped amber eyes never left the colossal opponent before it. It did not rush to pounce. Instead it circled and probed, moving lightly yet swiftly, positioning itself constantly within the bear's blind spots. It displayed the cunning and ferocity worthy of the king of beasts. Facing it, the giant brown bear stood firm, its mountainous frame rooted solidly to the earth with no intention of dodging. Its chest heaved with ragged breaths, small clouds of mist curling from its maw. Enormous paw-like forelimbs hovered slightly. Its fighting style was brutally direct, built for unrelenting frontal assault. The brown bear struck first. Thick arms swept sideways, cutting through the air with a sharp crack, aiming to smash the tiger's midsection and shatter its ribs in a single blow. The gust of wind carried terrifying force. A direct hit would cripple the tiger, even with its tough bones. The tiger's eyes sharpened. It flipped sideways in midair to evade the fatal horizontal swipe. Using the momentum of its roll, it twisted its body mid-leap. Its tail lashed forward like a steel whip toward the bear's vulnerable eye sockets. Its forepaws struck lightning fast, raking the bear's nose. The strike was sly, targeting weak points. Stung by the pain, the bear jerked its massive head backward. Thick fur prevented deep injury, yet the blow left a burning ache. Enraged, it lowered its head and snapped its jaws against the ground. Using the forward lean, its heavy body charged ahead. It attempted to bowl the tiger over and crush it under its weight. The tiger stepped back hastily to avoid the collision. Then it bowed its head, arched its spine, and sprang forward. It raced low to the ground like an arrow. Its jaws lunged for soft skin around the bear's foreleg joints. One charged, one retreated, one relied on brute strength, the other on clever tactics. The bear wielded overwhelming power, striking to kill and pressing its advantage at every turn. The tiger moved with elusive agility, attacking and defending rapidly to exploit every opening. They tangled endlessly. Repeated brutal charges and heavy swats from the bear were evaded by the tiger's nimble movements. Meanwhile, the tiger's sly biting and surprise claw strikes were absorbed by the bear's thick hide and sheer strength. Neither could gain a decisive upper hand. The battle remained locked in a bitter stalemate, and the slaughter grew ever more perilous. After several rounds of ferocious combat, the bulky brown bear was the first to wear out. Sustained bursts of brute strength had drained most of its stamina. Its massive frame moved sluggishly, its breathing rough and ragged like a bellows. Gaps began to appear in its once impenetrable assault. Knowing a prolonged head-on fight would end in defeat, a vicious scheme took shape in its feral mind. It deliberately feigned exhaustion, staggering backward 2 paces to appear worn and vulnerable. Yet its murky eyes darted sideways, gaze locking onto a shallow bend upstream along the stream. There lay its only chance to turn the tide, a young tiger cub. The tiny cub was covered in soft pale orange fur, small and fragile, the perfect target. It had hidden behind stream stones this entire time, trembling as it watched its mother fight the giant bear to the death. Terror and helplessness filled its young eyes. Too young with undeveloped bones and unsharpened claws and fangs, it possessed no means to defend itself. It could only huddle in the corner, forced to witness the brutal struggle, powerless to resist. Without giving the mother tiger time to react, the brown bear abruptly abandoned the fight. Its enormous body whirled around, ignoring its foe behind it, and charged straight for the cub. It was a cowardly, ruthless strike, casting aside all unwritten rules of beast combat to hunt the weakest youngling. A jolt of dread surged through the mother tiger, and a shrill roar ripped through the air. She instantly saw through the bear's cruel ploy. Her heart wrenched with terror. Abandoning pursuit, she threw herself forward at maximum speed to block the attack. But the distance was too great. She arrived too late. The tiger cub had been frozen stiff by the shadow of approaching death. Its mind went blank, unable to dodge. A gust of wind crashed down. The bear's broad, sharp paw descended with crushing weight, slamming hard against the cub's slender back. A soft squelch echoed out. Tender flesh split open instantly beneath the claws, 3 deep wounds gaping down to the bone. Warm blood gushed forth, soaking its soft fur, trickling down its spine and dripping into the clear stream. Agony flooded the cub's body. It convulsed violently, a faint, broken whimper trapped in its throat. Fear of death overwhelmed everything else. Driven by the primal urge to survive, it endured the searing torment of torn muscles. Its paws scrambled across the cold current. Stumbling over the upstream shallows, the bleeding cub poured out its last strength and fled toward the thick woodland downstream. And hidden within a rocky hollow tucked in that downstream woodland was Ping'an and Xiaohe. Dense foliage concealed their forms completely. Ping'an held her breath, every nerve taut as she silently observed the deadly struggle beside the stream. In the blink of an eye, that small bleeding figure fled headlong through the thickets, charging directly toward her hiding spot. Ping'an's heart lurched into her throat, every hair standing on end. If the cub crashed into her concealed nook, their position would be exposed. Enraged tiger and vengeful bear would race over in pursuit. She and Xiaohe would lose all cover, trapped between 2 apex predators. There was no time to hesitate. Ping'an focused her mind, and the huge boulder shielding her vanished into her spatial storage. With the rock gone, her view opened wide. She had removed it out of caution. If the 2 beasts charged her, she could summon the boulder at any moment to strike and defend herself. The instant the rock disappeared, Xiaohe tensed every limb. He spotted the bleeding cub rushing toward them and heard the thunderous roars echoing upstream. His black body trembled, overcome with instinctive dread. The oppressive murderous aura rolling from the battling giants threatened to cripple him. Yet glancing at his master beside him, his fear gave way to fierce loyalty. Though his legs shook uncontrollably, he did not retreat an inch. He stepped forward, positioning himself firmly in front of Ping'an to shield her entirely. The next moment, Xiaohe's body expanded rapidly, growing to nearly a meter tall. Beneath his glossy black hide, powerful muscles bulged, forming a frame brimming with dormant ferocity. His broad shoulders created an unbroken barrier. Dagger-like fangs protruded from his jaws, glinting coldly. His eyes fixed on the path ahead, stripped of all timidity, burning with sharp killing intent. Thick claws dug deep into the riverbank soil, carving grooves into the earth. Low rumbling growls vibrated in his throat. Every inch of him radiated unyielding menace, a towering black guardian beast holding the valley. The sprinting tiger cub skidded to an abrupt halt, its bloodied frame rigid. It had run blindly to escape danger, but now it lifted its head and saw the enlarged hound standing in its way. With Ping'an hidden within the shadows behind him. What eyes widened in shock, the agony of its wounds momentarily forgotten. It froze, not daring to move. The mother tiger and brown bear chasing the cub rounded the bend. They stopped short upon seeing the massive black hound downstream and Ping'an lurking nearby. Both giant beasts froze. Their deafening roars died away. Wariness and confusion clouded their eyes. The fury of their fight was temporarily suppressed by this unexpected third party. The stream gurgled. Silence descended over the woods. On one side stood Ping'an and her protective hound. On the other, the wounded, furious mother tiger desperate to safeguard her young. Opposite them loomed the violent, powerfully built brown bear. The three groups faced each other from separate corners of the valley, forming an intensely tense standoff. The gentle flow of the stream sounded unnervingly loud. Wind died away. Not a leaf stirred. Invisible threads of lethal tension wove through the valley, weighing heavily on Ping'an and the wild creatures. The air grew thick and stifling. No one dared make the first move, for pairs of watchful eyes locked across the distance. Every passing second felt like balancing upon a blade. A deadly battle waited only on a spark to ignite. Silence still hung heavy over the valley, the precarious three-way standoff balanced on a knife's edge. The wind faded. Only the stream murmured. The two predators who had fought until bloodthirsty now stood rigid, their gazes fixed firmly on the human and giant hound downstream. The mountainous brown bear heaved ragged breaths, its torso rising and falling sharply. Its brown fur was torn and matted, crisscrossed by cuts and gashes from which warm blood seeped and dripped. Even injured, a terrifying hostility clung to its form. Yet deep within its dull eyes lay far greater intelligence and caution than ordinary wild animals. It was no mindless brute. Over long years ruling these mountains, it had watched human hunters from afar and never forgotten the terror of their bows. It remembered the sharp whistle of arrows piercing the air, and how easily they could tear through flesh and bone. It had seen packs of wolves fall lifeless to such shots. Now its heavy stare locked onto Ping'an's hands. She held a sharp hunting bow steady in her grasp, arrows hanging at her waist capped with cold metal heads. The sharp tips glinted with lethal light beneath the forest canopy, triggering primal alarm within the bear. The great beast tilted its massive head, glancing sideways at the tiger beside it. The striped predator coiled its body, every muscle primed to strike. Red blazing eyes bore into the bear, white fangs bared, low warning growls rumbling continuously. Hatred over the cub's injury simmered inside it, ready to pounce and tear its foe apart at the smallest opening. Before the bear stood a tiger bent on vengeance. Across from it waited a human wielding deadly weapons whose strength remained unknown. It had fought the tiger to exhaustion. Its wounds throbbed constantly, leaving barely 30% of its full combat strength. If battle resumed, the tiger would attack relentlessly, and the human would likely loose arrows from concealment. Arrows were nearly impossible to evade. If multiple shots crippled it, the tiger would close in to finish it. It would die within this valley. Raw feral rage surrendered to the overwhelming urge to survive. This place was far too dangerous. Every extra second here brought closer doom. Abandoning all thought of continuing the fight, the brown bear twisted its bulky body around. Heavy paws slammed against the ground, sending stones rolling. It turned and fled without looking back into the deep forest, desperate to escape this deadly stretch of land. Ping'an watched the whole scene unfold, her mind calm and alert, allowing no trace of leniency. She understood the merciless rules of wilderness survival. These two were top-tier mountain predators, violent and vengeful. If either escaped relatively unharmed today, they would become grave threats to her home in the future. She quickly weighed her options. She dared not provoke both foes simultaneously. If she loosed arrows at tiger and bear alike, the two bitter enemies might set aside their feud and unite against her. The bear possessed overwhelming brute force, the tiger lightning speed. Attacked by both, even with Xiaohe guarding her, she would face certain ruin. Therefore, she resolved to target only the brown bear. If her arrow struck the bear, all its rage would turn toward her. The mother tiger already shared an unresolvable hatred for the bear and would seize the chance to renew its assault. The two beasts would wear each other down, trapped in conflict. She could observe safely from afar and reap the advantage, avoiding the risk of facing enemies on two fronts. Her plan solidified. Her gaze hardened, her resolve firm. She would not let the bear escape unscathed. Standing steady upon the riverside stones, she cast away all distractions and slowed her breathing to perfect stillness. She raised the bow and knocked an arrow in one fluid motion. In practice, her aim had often wavered, shots frequently missing the mark. Now, however, facing the mountain-sized bear lumbering away with no way to dodge, her spirit was eerily composed. She drew the bowstring back into a taut, sweeping curve. The string trembled faintly, storing immense force capable of piercing hide and muscle, killing intent concentrated on the arrowhead. Ping'an narrowed her eyes and released her fingers. Whir! The sharp sound of the arrow split the forest quiet. The silver shaft streaked forward like a flash of frigid light, striking squarely into the brown bear's broad shoulder blade as it fled. A sickening wet impact followed instantly. Sleek metal tore through coarse brown fur, pierced thick hide, and buried itself deep within dense muscle, driving several inches inward. The arrow shaft quivered violently, lodged firmly in flesh. Searing agony exploded outward from the shoulder, spreading through every limb. Hot blood welled around the shaft, soaking wide swathes of brown fur. The fleeing bear's enormous frame shuddered violently. Its legs buckled, nearly sending it crashing to the ground. This was no shallow scratch, it was the torment of pierced muscle and torn tissue. Every breath, every step pulled at the embedded arrow, twisting the wound as if countless steel needles churned inside its body. Agony stripped away the last of its rationality. The bear that had sought only escape was consumed by pain and blind fury. It skidded to a halt and spun around. Its once dull eyes blazed crimson, its features contorted with savagery. Lips peeled back to reveal yellowed, massive fangs. Roar! A thunderous bellow shook the entire valley. Sound waves rippled through the woods, shaking loose leaves and vibrating the earth. Tormented and burning with hatred, it cast aside all calculations, ignoring the tiger waiting hungrily behind it. Only one thought remained: tear apart the human who had wounded it. The bear pushed off with all four paws. Its mountain-like frame charged toward Ping'an in a reckless, suicidal rush. Swinging paws churned up gales of wind, snapping branches as it surged forward. The moment the bear whirled to attack, the watching tiger seized the golden opportunity. Seeing the human cripple and enrage the bear, it no longer held back. The striped predator launched itself forward, a vivid streak of color surging forth, saturated with killing intent. It landed precisely in the bear's blind side. Sharp claws sank into the bear's already injured lower back, jaws clamping down hard into flesh. Dragging against the bear's forward momentum, it ripped and tore relentlessly. Claws flayed skin open, blood spraying freely. Each wrenching movement spoke of a determination to kill the creature that had harmed its cub. Chaos erupted across the valley. The maddened bear carrying the embedded arrow charged toward Ping'an, while the tiger clung to its flank, harrying it without pause. The fixed arrow widened the wound with every struggle, blood flowing faster, pain piling higher. Yet the bear had lost all reason, roaring and battling heedless of injury within the stream valley. The instant the arrow took flight and fighting reignited, the already terrified, wounded tiger cub fled upstream. It slipped into the woodland and vanished without a trace. Wind howled. Beastly roars echoed. The scent of blood thickened. The wounded, enraged bear and vengeance-driven tiger clashed once more, every strike aimed to kill. Ping'an stood downstream with the enlarged Xiaohe stationed faithfully beside her. Human and beast held command over this deadly contest between wild predators. Wanting a clearer vantage point, she summoned the boulder from storage and stepped onto it. She watched the two giants twist and tear at one another. Trapped by the tiger, the bear could not maneuver to evade ranged fire. Unwilling to waste the chance to weaken the bear further, she readied more arrows and took aim in succession. The first arrow whistled forward. The bear twisted to fend off the tiger's lunge, shifting its bulk just enough. The arrow grazed its thick fur and buried itself in a tree trunk, missing its mark. The second shot followed quickly. She targeted the softer flesh of the bear's flank. At that exact moment, the tiger clamped its jaws onto the bear's nape, slowing its movement. The bear could not twist away, and the arrow sank deep into its ribs, opening another severe bleeding wound. She released the third arrow. Racked by pain, the bear lurched violently to shake off the tiger. Its body jolted, and the arrow veered off to embed itself in the riverbank mud, another miss. In mere moments, 3 arrows had been loosed. Only one found its target. The fresh rib wound compounded the piercing injury in its shoulder. Pain slowed the bear noticeably. Blood flowed endlessly from countless gashes, weakening its furious charge. Still, its rage burned unabated as it fought the tiger with every last ounce of strength. Blood pooled beneath the bear, soaking stones and soil, pouring continuously from the arrow wounds and dozens of claw and bite tears. Massive blood loss steadily drained the last of its strength. Its limbs grew heavier and stiffer. Charges that had once thundered forward slowed with every step. Each swipe of its paw, every twist of its body tugged at the two penetrating wounds. Layers of searing agony washing over it. Blackness flickered across its vision, and its colossal frame swayed unsteadily. Beside it, the tiger showed no pause in its vengeful assault. Sensing the brown bear's fading stamina, its strikes grew fiercer and swifter. Tiger claws raked repeatedly at old gashes across the bear's chest and abdomen. Sharp fangs targeted vulnerable patches of flesh, tearing open fresh wounds and accelerating the loss of blood. The brown bear tried to turn and swat the tiger away, yet its limbs no longer obeyed its will. Its enormous body staggered twice. Its heavy head drooped weakly. Its coarse, labored gasps turned thin and hoarse. No longer did it unleash roars that shook the valley. Only faint, raspy whimpers of pain escaped its throat. Seizing the moment when exhaustion unbalanced the bear, the tiger lunged with all its might. Its forepaws slammed hard against the bear's torso, and its fangs clamped firmly onto the skin of its neck. Tearing violently. Blood surged violently through the bear's body, and the last vestiges of strength drained completely. Its mountainous frame could sustain itself no longer. With a thunderous crash, it crashed onto the gravel of the stream valley. The impact sent rocks and dust billowing outward, accompanied by a deep rumble that echoed through the surroundings. Its limbs twitched futilely several times. The ferocity faded rapidly from its cloudy, beastly eyes. Warm blood continued to seep steadily from its wounds, and soon, it fell entirely still. The brown bear's massive form lay slumped on the ground. Warm blood wound across the dirt in a long scarlet trail. The tiger, drained by their brutal fight, lifted its head and let out a tiger's roar that reverberated through the mountains. It followed the trail of blood and hurried into the thick forest, paying no heed to Ping'an standing nearby. Ping'an remained rooted to the spot, watchfulness lingering in her eyes. The savage spectacle of the bear and tiger's battle remained vivid in her mind. She feared the tiger had only temporarily retreated and might circle back to attack at any moment. So she waited patiently where she stood. The forest fell silent all around. No more tiger roars echoed. Certain the tiger would not return anytime soon, a thought stirred in Ping'an's mind. She stared at the heavy bear carcass and pondered to herself, I can stow this in my spatial storage. When I return, I can feed it to the ghost thorns. Such a huge brown bear, I wonder what changes my precious ghost thorns will undergo. Ping'an rubbed her hands together as she faced the bear's body, looking like someone with a devious plan. She had just taken a step toward the carcass when faint clicking of hooves and claws echoed from the woods. The tiger that had left earlier had come back. Between its teeth, it gently carried a critically weak tiger cub. It set the small creature carefully in the middle of the dirt path, then leaped forward to stand between Ping'an and the bear corpse. Blocking her path. Ping'an immediately swapped her bow for a firewood cutting blade, gripping it tightly as she eyed the tiger warily. What is it trying to do? I did not harm its cub. Could it be seeking to vent its anger? She calmed her racing thoughts and studied the tiger's posture closely. Gone was the ferocity it had shown while fighting. Now, all hostility receded. Its head dipped slightly, front paws scraped lightly at the earth, and its powerful tail hung loosely. The series of placating, supple gestures spoke of remarkable intelligence, its gaze filled with humble entreaty. The tiger fixed its gaze on the human and maintained its pleading stance. It had seen this human from afar before, when it hunted with its cub. Every time she ventured into the mountains, she brought a black hound by her side. Whenever she gathered ripe wild fruits, she would feed them to the little black dog. She could also summon large portions of cooked meat to offer. If only it could conjure meat too, it would not need to wander endlessly to hunt for its young. After observing her for a long time, it knew this human was kind. She treated the black hound gently, always patting its head and offering food. If it could live under this human's care, that would be a fortunate outcome. The tiger shook its head abruptly, startled by its own absurd thought. What mattered most right now was saving its cub. It had once watched injured humans retrieve small bottles and sprinkle powders onto wounds, stopping the bleeding. At first, Ping'an could not make sense of the tiger's actions. She stood frozen, shifting her gaze repeatedly between the fading cub and the submissive adult tiger, before realizing with a jolt. The tiger wanted her to heal its young. Doubt seized Ping'an at once. She had witnessed firsthand the devastating power unleashed during the bear and tiger's fight. She knew full well how deadly a fully grown tiger could be. If she saved the cub today, once it matured, another highly dangerous predator would roam these mountains. Trouble might arise in the future. With that thought, Ping'an halted her steps, remaining unmoved, showing no intention of moving forward to offer aid. Seeing her refusal, the tiger grew increasingly anxious. It lowered its body and edged closer to Ping'an, then turned its head to gesture toward the intact brown bear carcass, signaling repeatedly that the entire kill belonged to her. It then lifted its head and let out a soft whine toward the depths of the forest, as if making a promise. Every prey it caught from now on would be carried and delivered to Ping'an. It begged only for her to save its cub. Ping'an glanced down at the weakly twitching cub on the ground, then toward the bloodied tiger beside her, which had cast aside all the pride of a wild beast. A decision slowly formed in her heart. The tiger had fought a life or death battle against the brown bear, exhausting nearly all its strength to claim victory. That enormous brown bear was prey it had won at the cost of immense effort. Ping'an thought to herself, this is the fruit of the tiger's desperate struggle. I have no right to claim it all for myself. If that is the case, I can try to help. Having made up her mind, Ping'an hesitated no longer, yet her vigilance never wavered. She had seen the tiger's terrifying strength. Wild beasts were unpredictable. She could not guarantee that while she leaned down to treat the cub, this predator would not suddenly lash out and attack. She met the eyes of the tiger crouching low before her and spoke slowly and clearly, gesturing alongside her words. I can save your cub, but I fear you may attack me without warning. I need to be certain you pose no threat to me. The intelligent tiger instantly understood her meaning. It nodded its massive head gently and obediently turned around. Still not feeling fully secure, Ping'an motioned for the tiger to walk over beside a large boulder and stay there. The tiger caught on and stood motionless beside the rock, submitting entirely to her arrangements. Relief washed over Ping'an, though only partially. She focused her mind and summoned a thick, durable coil of hemp rope from her spatial storage. She strode forward, circling the boulder and winding the rope tightly around the tiger's body, wrapping layer upon layer to secure its torso and limbs. Only its head and tail remained free to move. She tugged firmly on the knots repeatedly to check them. Satisfied that the tiger could not push off with its limbs or twist its frame, stripped of the ability to attack or struggle, and that the bindings would not slip loose, she finally relaxed. With all risks addressed, Ping'an walked toward the dying tiger cub beside the path. The cub appeared roughly 3 to 4 months old. It had shed the thin down of infancy and grown a coat of sleek pale yellow fur marked with tiger stripes, already bearing the shape of an adult tiger. Still, it looked somewhat undernourished. Its fur was matted and soaked with blood, covered in deep gashes left by the brown bear's claws. Multiple lacerations split the skin across its back and limbs, the bloody wounds a harrowing sight. Limbs that should have been sturdy and young lay limp on the soil. Its body twitched involuntarily from time to time. Foam tinged with blood trickled from its nostrils and muzzle. Its breathing was shallow and rapid, each inhale accompanied by small tremors. Life was slipping away fast. Ping'an sighed softly at the pitiful sight. The mountains were cruel, ruled by the law of the jungle. Yet all living creatures shared the same parental devotion. This fierce tiger, a dominant force in these woods, had set aside all the dignity of a wild predator to humbly beg a human for help, all for its only cub. It stirred sympathy within her. It reminded her of scenes she had seen in the hospital. Most parents exhausted every resource and stayed beside their sick children day and night, yet some chose to abandon their offspring to fate. Once, Ping'an could not comprehend such choices. She believed parents ought to care for the children they brought into the world. That changed after her time working in the hematology ward. She witnessed families whose children suffered lifelong, incurable illnesses. Young parents grew haggard, drained of all savings, until they finally left their children at the hospital. The child bore no resentment, saying their parents had already done everything they could. They did not wish to see their mother divorce and sacrifice her own chance at happiness for them. Ping'an pulled her wandering thoughts back to the cub. She had no guarantee of success. The cub's injuries were severe, and it had lost a great deal of blood. Whether it survived depended entirely on its own vitality and how well the medicine worked. She dared not delay any longer and mentally sifted through the supplies stored in her spatial space. Her reserves were abundant, stocked with all manner of healing potions and emergency medicine. She knelt to examine the cub's wounds carefully, her brows drawing tightly together. Numerous severe lacerations gaped open, flesh turned outward. Simple hemostasis, dressing and bandaging would not pull the torn tissue together to heal. Deep wounds beneath the surface would easily become infected and fester. In the cub's weakened state, it would not survive and death would follow regardless. Having reached this conclusion, Ping'an wasted no time. She retrieved a set of brand new sterile precision surgical instruments and specialized absorbable sutures from the medical section of her storage. These sutures dissolved naturally inside living tissue without requiring removal later, ideal for creatures she could not return to for follow-up treatment. She was uncertain how the cub's body would react to them, however. Well, there was no other option. She would try everything possible and tend to it afterward if needed. Once prepared, Ping'an began treatment. She first located a potent antiseptic disinfectant solution and poured it carefully over the cub's gaping wounds, methodically flushing away clotted blood and embedded grit. The harsh liquid stung the exposed flesh. Agony surged through the small creature. The cub, which had been barely able to move, convulsed violently. Its small body curled tightly. Tiny sharp claws dug into the dirt, and thin, shrill cries of suffering spilled forth, weak and broken, stirring sorrow in anyone who heard. Ping'an instinctively glanced toward the adult tiger beside the boulder. Hearing its cub's cries of agony, the bound tiger's massive body tensed completely. Fur rose along its spine. Golden eyes brimmed with overwhelming anxiety and distress. Muffled, restrained growls rumbled in its throat, and its large head strained toward the cub. Even consumed with pain and fear, it fought against every instinct to struggle against the ropes. It remained obediently restrained beside the boulder, waiting patiently for the outcome, placing its full trust in the human treating its young. Ping'an returned her focus, holding her breath. Her movements were steady and gentle as she guided the suture needle, aligning torn skin, threading the needle, drawing the suture tight and tying knots. Her technique was skilled and controlled, adjusting her strength to minimize the cub's suffering as she stitched each long, hideous wound closed, pulling the separated flesh firmly together. The longest wound she had ever sutured before measured 8 centimeters. The cub's cut stretched far longer, making the suturing process lengthy. She needed complete focus, every stitch executed with extreme caution, no room for error. Ping'an chose not to use anesthetic. She feared the tiger would panic if it thought its cub had stopped moving and lose control. Tormented by unrelenting pain, the cub whimpered repeatedly and trembled, yet endured without thrashing wildly, as if it understood it was being saved. When all deep lacerations were fully sutured, Ping'an let out a long breath of relief. She immediately retrieved a gentle, potent healing salve, spreading a thick, even layer across every stitched wound and superficial abrasion. The salve would quickly stop bleeding, soothe inflammation, and encourage new tissue to grow. Once all wounds were coated, Ping'an opened her storage once more and pulled out several soft cotton garments she had outgrown long ago. She tore the clean fabric neatly into strips of uniform width and size. Carefully, she wrapped each wound on the cub, securing the ointment and shielding the newly sutured delicate flesh, wrapping the injured little tiger securely. When the entire treatment was complete, Ping'an slowly straightened and exhaled softly. Before long, the medicine began to take effect. The cub's constant convulsions and cries of distress gradually faded. Its rapid, shallow breathing grew slower and steadier. Its tight, curled body relaxed. It lay weakly on the warm soil, heavy eyelids drooping. No more blood leaked from its wounds, the color around the sutures settling. The life force that had been slipping away was stabilized. Though still gravely weak, its life was preserved. Exhausted beyond measure, it sank into a deep sleep. The tiger bound beside the boulder had watched every second without looking away, observing each step of cleaning, suturing, applying salve, and bandaging. When it saw the cub stop suffering and its breathing stabilize, the immense tension leaving its frame, all rage and terror faded from its eyes, replaced by profound gratitude and docility. It twisted its bound head slightly and let out a soft, low whine toward Ping'an, a sound without menace, carrying only sincere thanks. Ping'an glanced at it and stepped forward, tugging lightly at the rope to confirm it remained secure. She spoke quietly, "Your cub is stable for now. I have sutured and dressed all its wounds. The bleeding has stopped. Its life is saved. Whether it makes a full recovery depends on how it fares through the night." The tiger seemed to comprehend her words, nodding repeatedly in a strikingly human manner. Its great head bowed gently, and the way it regarded Ping'an shifted. No longer merely a kind human, she had become its savior. Ping'an was the one who had saved its only offspring, the greatest deliverance the tiger and its cub would ever know. Meeting this human was the greatest stroke of luck in its life. As events would prove, it was fortune that would last forever. Mountain night breezes drifted through the trees, clearing the heavy scent of blood. Ping'an looked at the sleeping cub on the ground, then at the tiger watching its young beside the boulder. The quiet scene carried an air of tender affection between parent and cub. Dusk had fallen. It was time for her to leave. Time to take the brown bear. Ping'an hurried excitedly over to the bear's body. She focused her mind, and the entire carcass vanished completely into her spatial storage. After securing the bear, Ping'an walked over to the tiger. She untwisted the ropes wrapped around its body and stored the hemp rope away. Freed from restraints, the tiger stretched its stiff limbs. Instead of leaving immediately, it lowered its head and rubbed its cheek gently against the back of Ping'an's hand to show affection. "Stay away from me. We are not that close. Please do not act so familiar." Startled by the gesture, Ping'an stepped hastily backward, raising her cutting blade and watching the tiger with caution. Xiaohei also witnessed the tiger brushing against Ping'an. Unable to understand the gesture, it assumed the large predator intended to bite its owner. For bristling all over its body, the hound darted forward, sharp claws swiping hard against the tiger's flank. "Protect master, fight tiger." Woof! The tiger had already grown tense after Ping'an stepped back and raised her blade, sitting dejectedly on its haunches. Before it could react, a sharp pain flared across its skin. A thin streak of blood appeared on its golden pelt. Stung, the tiger lifted its head sharply to see the black hound belonging to its savior. That paw strike lacked the force of the brown bear, yet its claws were remarkably sharp. Xiaohei refused to back down. Body low, it bared its teeth fiercely toward the tiger, coiled to spring, ready to attack again at the slightest hostile movement. Ping'an's expression turned cold at the sight. If the tiger harmed Xiaohei, she would stop at nothing to defeat it. Contrary to expectations, the tiger only flinched instinctively. It made no move to retaliate, remaining seated calmly. Deep hurt welled up in its eyes. The tiger felt wronged. It had only wanted to express its gratitude. Ping'an wondered if she was imagining things. How could she see hurt in a tiger's eyes? It ought to have grown angry. Yet that was plainly the case. Her wariness eased slightly. Evidently, the tiger recognized she had saved its cub and treated her with restraint. Though somewhat reassured, Ping'an kept the blade held before her chest. She spoke sternly to the tiger. "I have sutured and bandaged all wounds on your cub. The bleeding has stopped, and its life is secured. Hurry back to the mountains to recover with it. From now on, be extra careful when foraging outside. Don't ever pick fights with fierce predators like brown bears again." The tiger seemed to fully understand Ping'an's advice. It let out a low whine, bent down and gently picked up its unconscious cub in its jaws. It lifted its head and stared deeply at Ping'an, its gaze filled with gratitude and reluctance. Then it turned and strode into the thick forest. Its figure was soon swallowed by layers of foliage and vanished completely. Once she saw the tiger and its cub disappear, Ping'an let out a sigh of relief. She quickly called Xiaohei beside her and hurried downhill. The sky had turned dim. She dared not linger in the mountains and hurried home as fast as she could. When she reached flat ground, she summoned an electric scooter. She twisted the throttle all the way and raced home at top speed. Phew, finally home. My safe house, here I come. The first thing she did upon arriving at the gate was circle the courtyard wall to inspect everything carefully. Only after confirming there was no danger around did she open the gate, walk into the yard and lock it behind her. She had never noticed it before, but now the empty space behind the gate felt strangely barren. She resolved to head up the mountain in a couple of days to cut a tree and make a sturdy doorstop. Her nerves, taut for an entire day, finally relaxed. Leaning back on the sofa, Ping'an was overcome with swirling emotions. It had only been a single day, yet she had witnessed a brutal battle between a bear and a tiger deep in the mountains. She had risked her life to shoot the brown bear. The tiger had turned to her for help. She had stitched and treated the injured cub before the tiger carried its young away. It was enough material for a whole movie. The twists and turns of this day were more dramatic than everything she had experienced in her 20-odd years of life. Growl. Now that her guard was down, she felt the gnaw of hunger. Rubbing her rumbling stomach, she planned to cook a hearty hot meal to reward herself after such a harrowing day. She walked into the kitchen and switched on the solar lamp hanging in the middle of the room. Warm yellow light spilled everywhere, brightening the kitchen and wrapping it in a cozy glow. Her gaze drifted to her spatial storage. She remembered the 5 plump wild ducks she had caught on her previous mountain trip. She settled on tonight's menu: braised duck feet in rich soy sauce, spicy braised pork belly, a fresh fruit platter, fluffy steamed white rice, and a glass of homemade wine to finish. Ping'an took the ingredients out of her space and laid them neatly on the counter. The 5 wild ducks looked just as fresh as the day she stored them. They often swam in ponds, so their feet ought to be wonderfully chewy. Plucking feathers was tedious work, so she would start with the duck feet stew. Moving with the cold efficiency of an executioner, she chopped off the feet of all 5 ducks before plucking each bird thoroughly. She hated finding stray feathers mid-meal, so she went over every inch with tweezers to remove any leftover down. She filled a basin with water and rinsed the feet repeatedly until they were spotlessly clean. The cleaned duck feet were pale and translucent. She put them into cold water with ginger slices and cooking wine to boil, skimming off every fleck of foam that rose to the surface with a small strainer. After fishing them out, she rinsed them once more with hot water and set them aside to drain. Next, she heated oil in the wok. She tossed in ginger, minced garlic, star anise, cinnamon, and bay leaves, simmering them gently over low heat to draw out their aromatic essence. Then she added a spoonful of broad bean paste and fried it until it released a glossy red oil. She tipped in the blanched duck feet and stir-fried vigorously, making sure every single foot was coated evenly in the vivid sauce. She poured in light soy sauce for umami, dark soy sauce for color, oyster sauce for extra fragrance, and a little rock sugar to balance the flavors. Once they were well seasoned, she poured in enough hot water to submerge all the duck feet. When the liquid came to a rolling boil, she transferred everything into a sand pot, covered the lid, and let it simmer slowly over low flame. While the duck feet stewed, Ping'an set about preparing the pork belly. She cut fresh pork belly into chunks and washed them, then dry-fried them in the wok to render out excess fat. She kept frying until the meat curled and turned golden brown, grease sizzling out to fill the kitchen with a rich, meaty aroma. She added ginger, scallions, dried chili peppers, and seasonings to stir-fry until fragrant, poured in water, and let it simmer on low heat. Gradually, the meat turned tender and flavorful, its aroma lingering in the air. With both main dishes simmering steadily, she washed northeast rice, added the right amount of water, and set it to steam in the steamer. With staple food and hot dishes underway, Ping'an began assembling the fruit platter. She brought out watermelon, cantaloupe, red pitaya, and strawberries, washing and peeling each one. Cutting fruit was deeply soothing. With every slice, the watermelon became neat blocks, the cantaloupe long strips, the pitaya uniform cubes, and the stemmed strawberries split in half. She arranged the 4 kinds of fruit artfully on a large white porcelain plate: juicy watermelon, sweet cantaloupe, soft pink pitaya, and bright red strawberries. Half an hour later, the lavish dinner was ready. Ping'an served the dishes and rice, carrying them one by one to the dining table beside the fruit platter. She fetched her wine jar and poured homemade wine into a goblet. The stew in the sand pot continued to bubble gently, thick scarlet sauce swirling and releasing an intoxicating savory scent. Ping'an picked up a duck foot and tasted it. Hours of slow simmering had made the duck feet tender enough to fall off the bone. The supple, bouncy skin clung to thick sauce, and the meat slipped free with a light suck. Layers of savory, fragrant, and mildly spicy flavors unfolded on her tongue, leaving a lasting aftertaste. "It's delicious," Ping'an murmured, then reached her chopsticks toward the pork belly. The braised pork belly glistened reddish-brown. Most of the fat had been rendered away, making it rich but not greasy, lean yet never dry. It melted softly between her teeth, spicy and aromatic, every mouthful packed with hearty meat flavor. Paired with plump steamed rice, it was incredibly satisfying. She curled her fingers around the stem of the goblet and swirled it gently. The purplish-red wine glowed warmly, carrying a long, fruity aroma. The liquid slid down her throat, smooth and mellow, sweet without harshness, spreading a faint wine scent across the table. After dinner, Ping'an leaned back on the sofa, spearing fruit with a fork and popping it into her mouth. The watermelon was crisp and full of juice, perfectly cutting through the richness of her meal. Xiaohei stared at its owner longingly. "Feed me, I'm starving too." Ping'an suddenly realized she had forgotten him. She apologized quickly. "Sorry, Xiaohei. My mind's been all scattered today, and I overlooked you." You're our family's great hero. You even dared stand up to a tiger. Wait, I'll cook a duck for you. She hurried to the kitchen, took out one of the footless ducks, plucked and cleaned it, then boiled it in cold water. Once fully cooked, she fished it out and chopped it into pieces. She scooped a large portion of rice, mixed it with leftover pork belly and braised duck feet, and tipped the mixture into the dog bowl. In another bowl, she placed washed, sliced fruit. When Xiaohei finished licking its bowl clean, Ping'an poured a bottle of milk into a separate dish. The dog was overjoyed, lapping up the milk until its belly bulged round. After Xiaohei finished eating, Ping'an returned to tidy the kitchen. She glanced at the remaining ducks in her spatial storage. Since she was already covered in grime, she plucked and cleaned the rest before storing them back inside. After everything that had happened today, she dared not take Xiaohei out for a walk. She let the dog relieve itself in the yard, and she would clean up afterward. She headed to the bathroom and mixed warm bathwater. She sniffed her clothes. They reeked of blood and sweat. She had not been injured. The blood came from stitching the tiger cub, and the cold sweat had broken out when she first encountered the brown bear and tiger. She had kept the clothes on while cooking to avoid wasting a clean set, but now that she had eaten, they had served their purpose. She tossed them straight into the trash. She lathered herself twice with soap to wash away all the grime. She touched her hair. It had grown longer, lying soft against the nape of her neck. She picked up scissors and hacked away until she had a close-cropped buzz cut. She ran a hand over the prickly hair, feeling the cool air on the top of her head. She cared nothing for looks. Practicality was all that mattered. Back in school, she had often wanted to shave her head completely after washing her hair and struggling to dry it, but she had not dared. It would draw too much attention on campus. Once, though, she had seen a senior girl with a shaved head ride past on an electric scooter and vanish into the crowd. She had thought she was mistaken at first, craning her neck to look again. When she confirmed the girl really was bald, she had been filled with admiration. She had never forgotten that senior. Now she could cut her hair however she pleased. She did not own hair clippers, so a close buzz cut would suffice for now. Just as she suspected, washing her hair was effortless. It nearly dried on its own without blow-drying. Ping'an changed into pajamas and walked to the bedroom. What she had experienced today was far too dangerous and bizarre. She needed to write it all down. This morning, I tried feeding Ghost Thorn with my own blood. Sure enough, it changed, growing noticeably larger. It confirmed the guess I had harbored for a long time. Hoping to speed up its maturation, I planned to head into the mountains to hunt large prey to feed it. It was as if the heavens heard my thought. Two enormous beasts appeared, terrifying me out of my wits. They attacked each other on sight, fighting as if they shared a blood feud. The scene was horrific and gory, enough to turn my stomach even now when I recall it. Back when I worked in the emergency ward, I saw many terrible injuries. I treated patients with fractured, split scalps, exposed raw tissue that reminded me of brain matter. I could no longer bring myself to eat braised pork brain after that. I also remember a young girl who suffered a deep knife wound across her back. The scar tissue spread like a centipede across her skin. Doctors drilled a hole from her side, threading a tube back and forth inside her wound, struggling to find the correct position for drainage. They could not get it right for a long time. The girl was young, and the anesthetic wore off quickly. She screamed in agony, repeating over and over, "Don't save me. It hurts too much. Mom, help me." Several skilled physicians and multiple tube sizes were tried before they finally inserted the drainage tube properly, blood flowing out along the tubing. I later learned she had been attacked by a classmate. I was utterly stunned. People carry such heavy hostility these days. Still, none of those scenes compared to what I witnessed today. The tiger's roar sent a shock through my body, making me want to collapse on the spot. The brown bear was equally fearsome. One swipe of its paw could, without exaggeration, shatter an ox's spine. Standing upright, it towered over 2 meters tall, casting an overwhelming shadow. I never want to see such a sight a second time in my life. Brown bears hold grudges relentlessly, chasing foes to the end. I did not want to become its target, so I took the shot and killed it. The tiger fought bravely as well. Working together, we finally brought down the brown bear. If this were ancient times, I would be hailed as a heroine who slayed a bear. Oh, and the tiger. It actually begged me to save its cub. I agreed to treat the little tiger in exchange for the brown bear carcass. After I untied it, it leaned forward as if to sniff my hand. I thought it planned to attack, so I stepped back warily. Looking back now, I should have struck first. My instincts still haven't adjusted. From now on, when danger looms, I will strike without hesitation. Xiaohei was incredibly brave too. When the tiger moved toward me, it lunged and swiped its paw. It is unbelievable. When I lived in the city, I once wondered whether Xiaohei would protect me or run away if danger struck. I feel ashamed for ever doubting it. I was deeply moved. Still, I hope a day like that never comes. It would mean I am far too weak to protect even my own dog. The adult tiger is magnificent, and the cub is adorable. I almost wish I could keep one. Haha. If I had a tiger, I could ride it everywhere, relying on its strength to hunt prey to feed my ghost thorn. Hee, I would be a great master. Wow, I have written so much today. My hand aches after such a long entry. I used to be able to copy text holding 3 pens at once back in the day. Enough writing. I'm worn out. I need to sleep. She closed her notebook, stretched her limbs, then tucked herself under the quilt to rest. Her brows stayed furrowed in her sleep, as if she dreamed of something dreadful.